Let's get started, chat. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I am a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational and entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a medical concern or question, psychiatric concern or question, mental health concern or question, please go see a licensed professional and get some personalized advice. Happy Monday, everyone. Hope people are doing well. Couple of quick announcements just before we hop into another call-in stream, which I'm really enjoying. So we're trying this new format here where we get to talk to multiple people from our community every stream, which is really fantastic. It's a little bit different from what we used to do in terms of deep dives with an individual about a particular topic. But a couple of quick announcements. The first is that our Touch Grass Photo Challenge is still going on. So this is where we've got like a series of challenges for y'all to try to do over the course of the summer. And you get points, and then there'll be rewards that we'll sort of be giving out in July of 2022. So y'all can use the Touch Grass command to submit photos. And I think there are about 100 submissions. 100 objectives. So we looked at some of the submissions from the Touch Grass campaign on Friday. I thought it was super cool. It's really fantastic to see people in our community doing what this community is for, which is building a healthy life. So going outside, I see people squeezing fresh juice, trying to pluck fresh fruit, touching grass, going swimming, looking at the night sky, petting something, and finding a wild animal, things like that. So if y'all need some kind of, push to get you out of the house, outside, breathing fresh air, sort of getting out of the four walls of the internet, because, a lot of what we believe about the world and ourselves and other people comes from the internet, but that's not real people. And so the real world is like out there. And so we want y'all to try to connect to it a little bit better. We also have a social sandbox. So this is just to give y'all an example, or to give y'all some information about this. So the topic for our social sandbox on Thursday, July 14th, I believe, is going to be pragmatics in conversation. So we're going to be teaching things like reading context, knowing what to say, when to say it, how to say it, followed by the usual conversation role play with Discord members. So we'll have I think Social Sandbox is led by an HG coach. So if y'all are interested in just showing up and sort of practicing conversation skills, things like that, like that's what it's there for. It's one of our most successful Discord events. And so if y'all are interested in sort of like practical, hands-on kind of like ability to practice, learn some basics, all of our coaches go through a rigorous curriculum around communication, right? So a big part of what we do is learn to be effective communicators. And when you're effective at your communication, you can connect with other people. You can learn more about them. You can also pay attention to, understanding where they are so that you can represent yourself without sort of worrying too much about it, or even offering, particular caveats or disclaimers when you're saying something. So y'all may hear me do this on stream, where sometimes I'll sort of ask for permission. For example, hey, so I noticed you think A, is it okay if I challenge that a little bit? And then sort of I offer a different explanation or a different interpretation. But even in terms of like getting people to think in a slightly different way, something as simple as asking for permission before you share like a contrary thought can be really, really helpful in terms of preventing an argument. So all those kinds of like practical communication tips are things that we teach our coaches, and apparently it's been really great in the community because they've been sort of sharing and facilitating communication leveling up, right? So much like I recently started playing the Persona series, and much like the Persona series, you can devote, Thursday, July 14th at 10 a.m., you can do your activity of joining the social sandbox, and it will level up your communication skills by a point. We also have an Ask a Coach session on Thursday, July 14th at 2 p.m. Central Time, about motivation. So if y'all have questions about motivation, and we've got one of our coaches that'll be on Discord, maybe a couple. Actually, I don't know how many, but and yeah, so we'll be sharing some of that information. So if you guys have questions about coaching or questions about motivation, we've got coaches that'll be there to sort of help y'all, sort through some things and answer questions. So Unknown needs their social stats upgraded. Well, that's why we have Social Sandbox, right? So much of what we do is based on video games. Oh, cool. There's more submissions. Drink a glass of water, get a new haircut. This hype, but let's get started. So we've got Collins, and I think the prompt for today is, what do you want to work on in yourself the most? So that's going to be our theme for the day. Tech Teller, we're ready to go.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi there.
Hey, what's up, friend?
Nothing much. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good to hear. I'm doing well. I'm nervous.
It's common. Can you tell me what you prefer to be called or what you go by?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Eric. You can call me Eric.
Nice to meet you, Eric.
Nice to meet you too, Dr. K.
And so I understand that you're wanting to work on something in yourself.
Absolutely. Yes.
And can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, what I wrote was I want to stop comparing myself to others. Um, I really want to be my own person, have my own beliefs, and live my own life. I find that I feel controlled by other people, and sometimes I feel like a puppet. I want to figure out why and be changed less by others.
Okay. So can you tell me a little bit about feeling like a puppet?
Um, yeah, I think maybe a better word for it is a sheep. Like I kind of feel, well, I felt like for a lot of my life I wasn't really in charge of what I was thinking or what I was doing.
Okay.
Um, I think that maybe because of just like school and just kind of the system of what I was raised in, and kind of being just kind of in public school and being told what to do all the time. I think it also has a lot to do with the way I was raised.
Can you tell me
Because
a little
I,
bit more about that?
yeah, so I'm the youngest sibling in my family. I have an older brother, and I often have felt like my family doesn't really let me think or like let me kind of express myself in the way that I want to. It was a very common experience for me in my household to be kind of um, I guess you could say like interrupted a lot. So I was like trying to say something or trying to finish a thought, and immediately my parents or my brother would come in and kind of finish it for me.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, and that was really problematic when I was younger because I kind of didn't really have the social skills or the strength or the resilience really to like stand up against it. And so it would just lead to this thing of like I wasn't really able to fully express what I wanted to say, and I was just kind of living as this idea of what my parents thought I was instead of living as myself.
Can you give me an example of how you were living as what your parents wanted you to be as opposed to you living the life that you wanted?
Um, I think it's hard for me to think of a specific example.
Sure.
A lot of this happened when I was kind of younger, and I've definitely worked on it now, and I think it's gotten a lot better, but it still happens. Um,
When you say it still happens, what is it?
it is like my parents interrupting me or finishing a thought for me. It's almost kind of just like this annoying thing now. It's not really as like dominating because right now I'm very much able to kind of stand up against it and be like, no, that's actually not what I was going to say. I was going to say this completely different thing. And that's kind of how it's gone most of the time. Like I've been sharing something about my life or sharing a thought that I had, and I kind of right in the middle of what I'm saying, my parents, specifically my mom, will kind of just say something and say like their idea about what it is I'm saying. And a lot of the times they're wrong because how could they know
Sure.
what's going on in my head?
Yep.
And then that leads to it led to kind of this weird thing happening in me where I felt like I was losing my ability to actually connect with my own experiences and
Certainly.
connect with my own ideas because they were always replaced by someone else's.
So, Eric, I think what I'm hearing that could be hard here is one is I'm hearing that you've made some progress in terms of communicating with your mom, especially, but I'm also hearing, if I'm reading between the lines, that there's some lingering effects of growing up in this household.
Yes,
Can you tell me a little bit about those?
absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I notice is kind of just this malleability and this way for me to just be shaped into anything that anyone else wants. Which may, I think, relate a little bit to like kind of people pleasing because I kind of just exist as this entity that agrees with everyone and just doesn't share any opinion that may be contradicting because for the longest time I didn't really know how.
Okay. So, internally, do you feel like you're malleable or do you just act malleable?
Internally, I do because I really feel like there's this part of me where my beliefs are not actually my beliefs. They're other people's beliefs. And there's not,
So, Eric, let me ask you something. How do you know
yeah,
if your beliefs are your beliefs or if they're someone else's beliefs?
that's a good question. Um, I think like if I can connect a belief to some experience that I've had or some kind of thinking that I've done on my own, then that's kind of my own belief.
That's a
I
fantastic answer.
thank you. I think like whenever I think it's someone else's belief, it's something I get told or
Can you give me an example of a belief that you hold in your head that is not yours? And I recognize I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I'm just so curious by this conversation. I'm like,
yeah, I it's like at the tip of my tongue because I really think there's a lot of times when it's happened, it's just hard to remember a specific one.
sure, yeah, I know it's hard to come up with those. Let me ask you something else. So you also mentioned at the very beginning that you want to stop comparing yourself to other people.
Mhm.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a part of it, at least for me, because I feel like when I look out into the world, I see a lot of people that are very sure of themselves and very sure of their beliefs. And they kind of a lot of people know who they are and they know what to believe and they think for themselves and they're their own person. And that is something that I have struggled with for pretty much my entire life is to be like that.
And you want to
And
be like that?
yeah, because I think it's healthy. I think it's good to have your own beliefs. I think it's good to have kind of a sense of um, just who you are in the world, I guess.
And
But
yeah,
oh, go ahead.
no, go
Go ahead.
ahead, please.
I think it causes problems, is what I was going to say, because I feel like I don't want to be so steadfast and holding to my beliefs that I'm completely stubborn and unwilling to change. I just feel like I'm so far on the opposite side of the spectrum that I'm almost like constantly changing my beliefs and constantly changing for other people that I feel like a chameleon. I'm just
Okay,
like adapting to whatever environment I'm in.
and that bothers you.
It does, because it kind of, in my relationships and when I'm with other people, I kind of just fit the mold in a lot of ways.
Does conflict scare you?
Yes.
What scares you about conflict?
Um, I don't really know. That's a tough question. I I mean, where my mind goes is immediately to like what happens when there's conflict at home, like with my parents.
What happens when there's
Uh,
conflict at home with your parents?
well, it's always very harsh.
In what
I
way?
mainly from my mother. She was just very, always very, she kind of is very perfectionistic, and I don't think it's her fault. She was raised in like a really bad way, and she inherited, I think, a lot of kind of the way she treats me from her parents. But she has just kind of like, honestly, kind of like emotionally abused me is the best way I could explain it.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah. It's hard, and I think it's not always been direct because there's been this kind of fear in me that wants to avoid that, of course, because I mean, who wants to get emotionally abused? It doesn't feel very good. Um, but I always saw my brother getting really like getting yelled at, getting criticized, getting punished. I kind of grew up in that environment. And so I think I started to believe that if I ever fucked up, I would I would get rained hellfire upon. Like there would just be no coming back because I saw what it did to my brother. Like my brother broke down crying in tears and was just so damaged by it that I was just like terrified to make any noise, make any conflict because I was just afraid of what would happen to me.
Okay. So, can I think for a second, Eric?
Yes, go for it.
Man, you're very eloquent.
Thank you. I get that a lot.
Why do you help? How do you understand that?
um, I think a lot of it is just the work that I've done personally. I think, I mean, I was in therapy for like 3 years. I think I do kind of a lot of introspection and self-discovery and meditation and just trying to understand what makes me me and kind of my thoughts and my beliefs and all this stuff. So I really spent a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it shows. I just want to say I'm very grateful that you're a part of the HG community. I think this
Oh,
community was made for people like you and is also exists because of people like you.
nice. Thank you.
Now back to your challenge. So let me just try to summarize for a second.
Okay.
So, and how about how old are you, Eric?
I'm 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm kind of noticing. If I stitch things together. So growing up in an environment with an overbearing parent who sometimes is emotionally abusive, but at the least doesn't give you the opportunity for self-expression. And sometimes if you self-express in ways that don't align with what she wants, it can actually be like damaging to you.
Yeah.
Right? So she's like not letting you like literally finish your sentences. And then at times if you finish the sentence in the wrong way, like you get punished for it.
Right.
And now what you find yourself doing is kind of adapting to your circumstances kind of way too easily. And it's not just that you are adapting to the circumstance, it's that you change to fit the circumstance. Right? So you're not acting. You're not like you're not a chameleon who pretends to be a different color, but at the core is still a chameleon. You're really more like a, like a doppelganger, where you become. Because what I'm noticing is that even in your mind, it's not like you hold particular beliefs and then you just act a particular way. You actually adopt those beliefs.
Right.
And so what I'm really noticing is that you're trying to figure out kind of like, who am I? And for the parts, and even when you do figure something out, some amount of conflict avoidance makes it hard for you to even convey that to other people.
Yeah,
Do you feel pretty lonely, Eric?
absolutely.
How do you because it sounds like it's a lonely way to go through life. I don't mean that as an indictment. It's more, I'm just noticing, because if you can't express the parts of you that you even know are authentic, it must feel very isolating.
Yeah. Um, I think I kind of have been alone for most of my life. Like, not physically, but kind of emotionally. I In middle school, I remember having friends, like having a group of people I hung out with, but I barely talked to them, and I barely like I literally just like barely interacted with them. It was this group of people I sat down at lunch with every day, but I hardly ever spoke. And then going through high school, I remember I had this solid group of friends, but looking back now, I never showed them any part of what I was, like who I was.
What made that hard to show?
Um, I guess my best theory is that I was scared of how they would react to it.
Okay, Eric, can I share some thoughts with you?
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to add, or anything that you feel like we didn't cover?
I do feel like I want to add that I think it's getting better because I don't want to, you know, be seen
Yeah.
as this like hopeless case. I think as I've gotten older, it's easier for me to have more concrete ideas, but as I've found like people people that become more important to me in my life, I'm kind of the same way. I'm much more able to change for them, and it's actually becoming quite a big problem. And it's why a lot of my relationships have ended, I think.
Say more about that.
Well, I mean, I can give you the example of like my most recent relationship. I was just dating this girl for about 5 months, and things were going really well at first. And then the last month, things kind of took a downturn. Um, and I'm still kind of processing it. I don't fully understand why, but my mind kind of immediately went to like, oh, I've kind of been like living to this standard that I think she's been creating. Like I had this image in my mind of a person who would be the ideal partner for her, and I like tirelessly worked to become that person for her.
Okay.
Um,
And then what happened in the last month?
and then it all fell apart. I was just like I think it was out of almost desperation. I was just like trying to find a way for us to be together. And so I'd really just tried to be the perfect person for her. And then I kind of ceased to exist in the relationship, and it was like I just became a mirror of her,
Okay.
and then the relationship failed.
And what happened to the relationship as you tried harder and harder to be the perfect person and make it work?
Um, it got worse and worse.
How do you understand that?
Um, I don't think I fully understand that. I think it's kind of tricky. I think maybe I was kind of becoming like this mirror of her, and so or maybe just like my ideas of what um, she wanted in a partner. and I was really desperately trying to like change myself to be that. And I think almost a part of me realized that I cannot change for
Yeah.
someone else.
that
And
makes
it just
that makes a
became
lot of sense, and I think there's a slightly different angle, which I'll share with the relationship stuff at the end. I'll kind of give you
okay.
something to think about. So what I'd love to
Sure.
do, Eric, if you're okay with it, is basically oversimplify everything and
Okay.
try to give you just some thoughts about your situation and how you got to be this way and what you can do about it. Is that cool?
That sounds great.
Okay. So the first is I'd like to share my understanding just after this brief interaction, which is going to be filled with, mistakes and whatnot about
Sure.
how you got to be this way. And
Okay.
then what I'd love to do, I'd love to explain to you how you got screwed. And then
Okay.
if it's okay, I'd like to share with you why I don't think you're screwed at all. And I think I'm actually quite hopeful for you.
Okay.
Does that work?
That sounds good to me.
Okay. So the first thing is I think you've done, first of all, so good at introspecting and the way that you articulate things, the way that you understand things. So, like you mentioned, you had sort of like a domineering mom. Any chance that mom has ADHD, by the way?
Highly likely. It runs
Okay.
in the family. My uncle has it on her side. She probably does. It's just undiagnosed.
It's interesting because the pattern that you describe of parents who finish their child's sentences and don't give their children a chance to speak is actually one of the most common signs I have seen in parents with undiagnosed ADHD. Right? So we think about
Wow.
ADHD as a flighty mind, and we're like, oh, my mind is over here. And we have all these memes about I sit down to do this, and then my mind is thinking about this, and I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about this. What people
Yeah.
don't realize is like what happens when that person becomes a parent of a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. As the kid starts to say something, and you are such a contemplative person, Eric, that your thoughts are going to be a little bit on the longer side, a little bit on the nuanced side, like, because
Yep.
you're a thinker,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
And her brain doesn't have time for that.
Right.
And so she's like, oh, no, no, like, so like you start a sentence and she's just going to finish it. So it's actually an interesting manifestation. I think I've seen it a lot of like literally undiagnosed ADHD in parents,
Wow.
in this kind of pattern with kids. So
Okay.
so you grew up with this, and it sounds like some of it really crossed the line into being a little bit more on the emotional abuse spectrum, which is
Yes.
unfortunate. The other thing is that for better or for worse, it also sounds like you may be high on the agreeableness
Yeah.
personality dimension, right? So like it sounds like you're familiar with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's something that I've worked on for sure, and I think I'm definitely dropping because that's possible, right? You can always change those
Yeah,
traits.
I don't think it's not a destiny that you are, it's not destiny. It's just you have to
Right.
understand certain aspects of your personality.
Right.
And then the next thing is that as agreeableness kind of pays it forward, plus a little bit of trauma thrown in, what you're going to end up with is this kind of conflict avoidance. And then you're
Yes.
also going to end up with a sense of like unclear identity, because a lot of our identity is actually formed through conversation. So our identity really solidifies when we externalize our thoughts in a particular way. So the other way to kind of
Wow.
think about this, is like if you think about, taking a test, when you actually take the knowledge in your head and you're forced to put it on paper in some way, that's actually what solidifies your understanding of something.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So
That's enlightening.
so I think a lot of what you're struggling with really makes a lot of sense to me in terms of it's a combination of like, maybe some amount of trauma, having a mom with ADHD, a high degree of agreeableness. That sort of manifests is not really understanding who you are or what you want. You're still sort of figuring that stuff out, which makes you highly malleable.
Mhm.
And then also makes it hard for you to be confident in yourself because you don't really know who you are, and confidence tends to come from knowing who you are.
Yes.
And that was a meaningful sigh.
Yeah.
And also like, conflict avoidance is going to kind of come out of that, because not only has your brain learned that okay, if I express my opinion and it's the wrong one, like that's going to really be painful for me. But you don't really have a strong sense of who you are to even like push you towards conflict. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So here's what I'd say. So it may sound bleak, but I'm glad you said you're doing better. I'm not surprised at all. So here's why I think actually you're going to be okay. The first is that you do seem highly, highly introspective, and you spend time like thinking about these things, working on these things. It sounds like you've been in therapy for a couple of years. So you're like, I think basically, I don't care how run down the house is. What matters is whether the person who's living there is actively going to work on fixing it up.
Sure.
Right? So you can take a brand new house with someone who does no maintenance, and 5 years from now, their house is going to be trash. Or you can take a fixer-upper and have someone who's going to do a lot of maintenance, and 5 years from now, even though one person started out with a beautiful house and one person started out with like a dilapidated house, 5 years from now, their positions are going to be completely different depending on what you put in. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm
And
the fixer-upper.
you are the fixer-upper, right? So I don't know that your house is that dilapidated, but one thing that I do know is that just talking to you, I can tell that you're very thoughtful about working on yourself, discovering things about yourself, and things like that. And that's ultimately like what matters. It's not about what level you start the game with. It's about whether you're choosing to level up or AFK. And what I'm getting from you is that you're really leveling up, which is awesome. Is that,
Yeah. Trying to,
are
for
you
sure.
okay with that? Does that bother you if I say that in some way?
No,
Okay.
I think that sounds really hopeful, actually.
So now on to a couple of concrete things. The
Okay.
first is that, so you're going to have to work. I would actually start with like conflict avoidance. So
Okay.
what I would sort of recommend is that as you develop new relationships, the script that your brain learned about conflict avoidance is not going to apply to everyone outside of your mom. Right? So even today with your mom, creating conflict may be emotionally punishing, but as you meet people, as you start dating, as you make friends, what I really want you to do is almost experiment with the part of your mind that is avoidant to conflict. So there's going to be a part of your
Okay.
mind that's like, don't say that. They won't like it, or they won't be your
Yeah.
friend. And so what I really think you've really got to try to do is not necessarily disagree with that part of your mind, but test the waters. So almost think of that part of
Okay.
your mind like a kid who's scared to get in the water, even though you're there and they've got floaties and everything is safe. You don't want to push them in because that could be disastrous. You could go that way too. And if you push them enough times, they'll be okay with it, but they'll be kind of a traumatic experience. What you really
Right.
want to do is like encourage them to like put their feet in the water a little bit, right? So it could be something as
Okay.
simple as if you're hanging out with friends and people are trying to figure out what to eat and someone is like, "Man, I really want Thai food." And you actually don't want Thai food. In that moment, you're going to be like, okay, whatever. But what I really want you to do is like advocate for yourself in the tiniest way. And that's where
Okay.
like you can just tell people, hey, I had Thai yesterday. Are y'all open to anything else? And you're not telling
Sure.
them, hey, I'm not willing to eat Thai food. You're not saying screw, you're not really creating conflict because a lot of times people who are conflict avoidant won't even let their preferences be known.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like, so we're not actually saying create conflict, but there's a part of your mind that may be paranoid. Oh my God, they won't like it.
Yeah.
So that's where you just want to like open the door to communication with other people and letting your preferences be known. How do you feel about that?
I feel like that's a good step to kind of it sounds to me like kind of like a baby step in the right direction.
That's
Um,
all. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's something that I've already kind of started doing. I
Excellent.
think just in my journey, I don't even know if I've really like labeled that as just like the conflict avoidance thing. It's just I've just started trying to be more upfront with people about what I want. And like I don't know, something that comes to my mind is just like if someone's playing a song that I don't like, I don't really want to have to sit there and endure the whole song. And if it's a song that I really don't like, I want to actually be able to like have some power and be able to change it if I want to. It's like, hey, I really don't like this song. Can we listen to something else?
Be-
Something like that.
beautiful, beautiful example. So as you take those baby steps, I think what you'll discover is your authenticity will start to shine through. Your authenticity is there. You know who you are. I'm confident you know who you are, even though you may not. But I think you know. Like, I think we actually, let me change that. You may not know who you are, but I think anyone who's listening to this call has a sense of who you are. Right? And like, even if we were to ask like Twitch chat for a second, like who is Eric and how would you describe Eric? We'll see what they say. So first of all, Twitch chat agrees that very much so. They know who you are. So he is me. He's a 5-head. He's a Giga Chad. He's a Chad. Eric is a Giga. He's insightful. He's introspective. He's reflective. He's smart. Seems nice. Wow. Do be pretty epic though. Considerate. Cool and calm guy.
A pretty great community you've built here, Dr. K.
But this is the thing. I didn't build the community. Y'all built it by showing up, right? So someone else is saying Eric is a compassionate and awesome friend, right? Someone else says that they'd smoke with you. So I assume that that's an endorsement of some kind. But I think that there's a lot of genuineness that we can all feel from you, Eric. I get the sense that you're just someone who's like walking the journey and has recognized that you've got this journey to walk and you've started to take steps. And what you're really like, in a sense, looking for is not even necessarily guidance, but just like some kind of feedback that what you're doing is okay.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I'm really 100%. Getting from you. And so I think as you start to take these baby steps, you'll start to uncover your authentic self, and then you'll start to be a little bit less malleable as you advocate for yourself. Right? So I'm actually not so worried about that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? Is that helpful at all? I'm not even sure, really.
It does.
Okay.
It is very helpful. I think I'm still partially worried about like when people in my life are so important to me that I really want to respect their opinions. And so I start to kind of do the same thing and mold myself to be more like their opinions or their beliefs.
Yes. So now we get to the real tip I'm going to give you, which is this relationship stuff. So,
thank you. Yes.
So the relationship stuff is like, here's Eric. Eric wants to be the perfect man for this particular person, right? So you try to be the perfect man. You're like dating for a couple months, and then something starts to go a little bit south. And then you're like, okay, Eric needs to be doing a better job. I'm going to be more the perfect man, more the perfect man, more the perfect man. And the more that you try to be the perfect man, the more the relationship deteriorates, right?
Right.
So here's the key thing that you've got to watch out for. So as relationships become important to you, small steps become harder or insufficient. Does that make sense?
You mean like taking like those baby steps and advocating for myself?
Yeah.
With,
So like
small things.
Yeah. So
it doesn't really work anymore.
Yeah. So if you're with a work colleague and there's like nothing invested in the relationship, and I'm like, hey, like let's go get Thai, and you're like, well, I had Thai yesterday. You can take that small step because the relationship, you can afford to damage the relationship. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
But if I'm your girlfriend and I'm like, I want to eat Thai today, that's when it's going to be hard for you to take the baby step, because that's when you're like, okay, well, like I want to be a good boyfriend and my girlfriend wants Thai, which means we're eating Thai. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the more that you value the relationship, the harder it's going to be for you to advocate yourself in it.
Yeah.
Which is really problematic, right? Because
absolutely,
that's where you need to advocate for yourself the most. And that's why we see this pattern that you have where in these relationships that are important to you, it's hard for you to be yourself. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So going to give you a couple tips. So first of all, recognize that it's going to be hard, but over time you want to take baby steps with like people that are not your important relationships, and then you want to start taking them in your important relationships as well. Okay?
Okay.
One last thing to mention. So this is really important to understand about relationships. When you try to save a relationship, in a sense, you're kind of dooming it to failure. So one of my mentors once told me, I know it sounds kind of weird, The doctor who goes the extra mile for a patient goes a mile too far.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
I think I feel like in that example for with the doctor, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me. But I get what you're saying as far as my relationships, because I immediately think like I was definitely trying to save something that maybe just wasn't meant to be.
And that's the key thing. So I want you to understand this. If there are 100 dishes in the sink and I do 99 of them, the more that I invest, so I'm supposed to do half the dishes. Let me start over because that's a non sequitur of an example. So if there are 100 dishes in the sink and my responsibility is 50 and my partner's responsibility is 50, as I start doing 60, 70, 80, and 90 of the dishes, what happens to my partner's responsibility for doing the dishes?
It shrinks.
Absolutely. And so we see this pattern a lot where the more you try to save the relationship, the more you allow the other person to become uninvested.
Hmm.
So this is a huge problem where the harder you try, because a relationship is supposed to be 50-50. There's no way to work. There's no way it works unless both people are working towards it. And
Right.
interestingly enough, the more responsibility you take for saving it, the less you're making it 50-50. And the more you end up doing it anyway.
Wow.
So we see this pattern a lot where the harder you try, the worse things get. Which it should be the opposite, right? Like that's the whole
Right.
point. That's why you try
Yeah.
harder. But what you're actually doing is absolving the other party of responsibility, and you're no longer creating a relationship. You're creating some kind of weird, like uneven, dependent kind of relationship thing
Yeah.
where
It
you're
started to feel like at the end she was just tagging along.
absolutely right. And the reason she started tagging along is because you started leading. And then you started leading and leading and leading and leading and leading and leading. And then she's going to slip into tagging along, tagging along, tagging along. So someone in chat is saying, so don't try too hard. It's not about not trying hard. You should try hard. You just shouldn't do their share of the trying.
Hmm. So what does that look like though?
Great question. So 4 months into the relationship, what did you start to feel about the relationship?
Um, I started to feel like she wasn't really putting in her share. Like I kind of started to feel unwanted.
Okay, great. So I feel unwanted in the relationship. And what did you do?
I tried to fix myself. I tried to make myself into a person that she would really like.
So, okay, so this is a wonderful example and also a devastating situation. So if you feel unwanted in the relationship and then you try to make yourself into something that is more wanted, you're doing more of the work.
Right.
So the right move there, and I know this is going to be terrifying for you, Eric, is having a conversation with her about not feeling valued in the relationship.
Hmm.
How does that feel to you?
That feels like I tried to do that and I kept coming up against a wall.
What do you mean?
I frequently brought up that I felt like she didn't really want to be in the relationship anymore, or that she was kind of searching for a reason to get out, like searching just for anything that she could use to say, I want to break up with you. And that started to kind of, I think it started to wear on me. And I definitely like started to feel bad about myself. And so I brought it up and I'm like, hey,
And
what's going on?
and what did
You
she
know, like
say?
she said that she was feeling really depressed and she felt like she wasn't capable of putting that effort in. But honestly, what I really got from that was that she just didn't want to be in the relationship anymore.
Okay. So now, Eric, okay, so we finally hit on something, Eric, where I think you've got it possibly wrong.
Okay.
So this is where, so let's just think through this, and this is expanding beyond the original thing, but I think it's a
Yeah.
fantastic example, and I really appreciate you sharing this. Okay. So
Okay.
now let's try to understand. If I come to my partner, so let's say I talk to you, Eric, and I say, Eric, you're looking for an excuse to break up with me. How do you respond to that? Let's assume we're in a relationship that is healthy.
Yeah. I think I was going to say it kind of depends on how I'm feeling, but I would say that's probably untrue.
So
don't,
how are
'cause
you going to convince me that that is not true?
um, I don't know.
Exactly. So she gave you an answer and she says, hey, I'm depressed right now and can't contribute quite as much to the relationship.
Mhm.
And what did you do with her answer?
I said it was bullshit, pretty much.
Right? So if she's actually depressed, how is she supposed to convince you?
I don't know.
So, like,
I think all she can do is just tell the truth about what she's dealing with.
I mean, so she tried.
Mhm.
And what did you do with that?
I told her she was wrong.
Okay, then. Right? So you've got to be super careful. So this is really important to understand in relationships. Are you doing okay, Eric? With I do think that you're sort of making a mistake with the way you handle this. Is it okay for me to point this out, or do you feel like ashamed by the way I'm talking?
It's okay. It's definitely it's very fresh, but I think it's good to kind of get it all out there because I
Good.
think
So
there's a lot of things that I did wrong.
no, I mean, so I don't actually. The whole problem with you, Eric, is that you're doing 90% of it right. Like you're introspective, you think about things, you're working on yourself. Like this is the only thing where I think this is where but this happens, right? So your insecurities are going to manifest in a particular way, where you think she wants to break up with you because maybe she is spending less time. So like let's just look at the scenario. So if she starts to get depressed, first 3 months are great. You're putting a lot into the relationship. She's putting a lot into the relationship. She starts to get depressed. Her energy level goes down. You start to feel less cared for, which is an accurate feeling because she's literally contributing less to the relationship. Your feelings are completely valid. When you have a conversation with her, though, you're setting her up for an impossible standard. Because even if she gives you an answer, that's not, even if it's the right answer, it's not going to satisfy you. Now, there's always the possibility that she's using depression as a BS excuse. I don't want to say that people don't do that. So I'm not saying objectively that you're wrong there.
Right.
What
And
I'm
that's kind of what I was thinking. I mean,
But what I'm
I
saying
don't
is
know.
that strategically is not going to work in your favor, right? Because
Right.
if
And
she
I get
really,
that.
yeah, if she really is depressed, then like, and you're not willing to accept that as a reason, then does that make sense? Of like, and this may go back to some of your insecurities that you think deep down you're unlovable or whatever. And so if you think that, then if other things happen like depression, do you see how that insecurity will like interpret her depression as, oh, see, I'm unlovable?
Yeah, I
So
get that.
so that's where I would just be super careful about the way that you, so going forward, a couple of concrete tips. One is that, I think you did the right thing. You had a conversation, but then you have to be careful because how open-minded are you in terms of that conversation,
Not very.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's where like, then that's going to, I mean, I say this harshly, it's going to doom the relationship if one party is not open-minded to what the other person is thinking.
Right. I think I was very blinded by my own emotions.
And that's fair, right? And this is why like relationships take leveling up. I don't think that, do I think that you quote unquote made a mistake? Sure, maybe, right? Because maybe she was BSing you. We don't know. The other thing is that I think it's a completely forgivable mistake to make for a 21-year-old who's like learning how to be in a relationship. Everybody makes this mistake. And it's
That
really
makes me
about,
feel better.
yeah. So I'm not, even though I'm criticizing you on some level, I think it's like I don't know how to say this, but somewhere along the way as a society, we like made it not okay to make mistakes.
Yeah. And also in my household, it's 100% not okay to make mistakes.
Yeah. So I think that you're going to make a lot more relationship mistakes, and I encourage you to do so. And I encourage you to keep taking the attitude that you have, which will, I'm very confident that you will end up in a happy, healthy relationship if you just keep doing what you're doing.
Okay.
On a concrete sense, what I would be really careful about is the next time you're feeling underappreciated, you've got to balance a couple of things. One is that the harder you try to make someone else happy when they are not invested in it, that's just going to shift responsibility away from them. Put it all on you is going to cause you to burn out and won't create a healthy relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Second thing is that if you do have concerns in a relationship, when you have that conversation, you need to have an open mind. So it's okay
Right.
to share your feelings, but you really need to be in a space to hear what the other person says. Because oftentimes what happens is we set a standard on our partners that's impossible for them to meet. And,
Right.
it's sort of like, okay, like I don't feel loved. And it's like, okay, well, let's think about, okay, concretely what's going on here. And the other thing is that sometimes you can also offer like really concrete things like, hey, there are a couple of things I need from you. So like, I need you to, like, if I'm dating someone, I at least want someone to, answer back within a certain amount of time. Like, I understand if you can't talk every day or every 2 days or whatever, but like you can set concrete, you can make it clear for them instead of talking about, I feel undervalued. Like, what are the actions that the person takes to make you feel more valued? Sometimes people need direction there.
Okay.
But I would just be super careful about this whole, like, it's good that you're voicing your feelings in a relationship, but then you should listen, you should speak and you should listen.
Right.
And if you sort of assume that this is BS, then that's like, if I was talking to her, for example, and she called in and she's like, I don't know what to do. I've been really depressed and my boyfriend doesn't believe me and thinks I'm looking for an excuse to break up. He's a wonderful person, very insightful, Giga Chad, very respectful, introspective, is working on himself, is amazing, makes me happy. I just don't have energy in the relationship. What do I do? Right? Like, does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
Cool.
Because it's very different than it works in my mind, I think.
Can you summarize for us how it works in your mind?
Essentially, I was feeling really insecure and I was feeling like she was kind of backing out of the relationship and that she didn't want to be with me anymore, which no doubt is due to kind of some past trauma, some prior relationship scars that maybe didn't heal. But I got very insecure and I started to bring it up and I was like, hey, what's going on? I feel like you're not really invested in this relationship. And she gave me what I think is probably a pretty legitimate excuse. I'm really depressed and I just don't really have the energy or the like capacity to be the person for you in this relationship. And I essentially just didn't believe her and I told her that she was wrong and that she was just looking for a way to break up with me. Which now that I like when I say that out loud, like the whole time while you were talking, it became so evidently clear because the moment I said it out loud, I'm like, oh, like I really kind of should have believed her. Like I think that's a totally valid reason. And I was just so caught up in my own insecurity that I did not realize that she was struggling and legitimately could not function in the relationship.
Fantastic, Eric. You've just leveled up. So a
Thank you.
couple of things that I just want to mention. The first is that I want you to notice the relationship between you speaking and you learning.
Okay.
Right? So I honestly, bro, I kind of stumbled through this without making too much sense.
I feel like you made a lot of sense.
You interpreted it really well. But I think the real learning and the real explanation, like that summary at the end, was beautiful. And I think that's when, like, does that sort of make sense? Like, it's not necessarily my answers that really bring out the learning. It's actually like you piecing it together. And as you said,
Right.
as I was saying it, I started to realize.
Yeah.
And so this kind of goes back to like your upbringing when you weren't given a chance to speak. And so you weren't given a chance to learn about yourself and realize things about yourself. And all you need is just a place for someone to listen, and you'll be fine.
Oh my God.
The last thing, you okay?
That was a lot. Yeah. I think that's, I mean, yeah, sorry, continue.
It's sort of like okay. The last thing is that, in the future, I don't necessarily think you should believe her that she's depressed, but you should at least listen with an open mind. I know it sounds kind of weird,
Well,
but like,
what's the difference?
so great question, and maybe I should have just left that for later. But so there's a difference between having an open mind and accepting at face value whatever your partner says.
Okay.
Right? So like I'm not saying you shouldn't believe her, but like I don't want to set you up for the next relationship where anyone plays the depression card and you get
Right.
manipulated by that, because unfortunately that does happen. Where
Right.
people will use depression or mental illness as an excuse for like not fulfilling their responsibilities. And that's where it's like there's just a balance. So what I'd really encourage you to do is, you said that's a valid excuse. That even it's not an excuse, it's a reason. And what I really want you to do in those conversations is don't swing the pendulum from complete doubt to complete belief. Be in the middle. Where, hey,
Okay.
this is my experience of the relationship. Can you help me understand if you're feeling this at all yourself, or like what's going on, or has something changed, or like talk to me. Like listen with an open mind and open yourself up to, really listening to what your partner is saying. And also recognize that sometimes, like, honestly, that's the thing, is I don't want you to think that every time going forward, people who say they're depressed really are depressed, and that makes things okay in terms of them not living up to the responsibility of the relationship.
Right.
So that was just the last thing, but I think maybe should have just left. I should have stopped
No,
where
I
we
think
were earlier.
I
But
think that's important, because I think in like what you're saying is, in the case that she is saying that she's depressed as kind of a way to shirk her responsibilities in the relationship, then that becomes kind of dangerous if I just
absolutely.
accept that in all future relationships.
Exactly. That's exactly the point that I was trying to get across. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm optimistic for you, Eric. I think, continue speaking your truth and continue going to places where people are willing to listen. And I think
Yes.
you're going to be fine, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Okay. So let's just summarize quickly before we move on to the next one. So first of all, if we face problems in life, sometimes we don't realize that those problems are rooted in our past experiences or even conditioning, right? So as we grow up, we get conditioned to believe particular things. The challenge is that what we get conditioned to believe, so if I've got a domineering mother, for example, who doesn't let me express myself, what that means is that later, so early on, I learn that expressing myself results in some kind of like punishment. And so I learn a survival mechanism, which is, okay, I'm not going to speak to anyone, and I'm not going to state what my preferences are. We start to become really conflict avoidant. And then what starts to happen is we enter these relationships where we don't want to upset anyone. Now, the reason we don't want to upset anyone is because we grew up learning that disagreeing with people is really, really emotionally painful or even physically painful. And so then what happens is it starts with like little things, right? Like, like someone else wants to go eat Italian food for dinner, but I'm gluten-free and there's nothing I can eat there. but I don't want to upset them. So what I end up doing is I'm like, okay, fine. So I don't even state my preferences. And then what happens is like the person that I am gets overcome by like all of the people's preferences around me. And then I'm not really advocating for myself. And even then it's like hard to connect with other people because no one ever gets to know the real me because I'm busy pretending to be whatever they want me to be. So the only person that they like is the mask that I've put on, right? I'm playing a character and they like the character, they don't like the real me. And this becomes a real problem, especially in romantic relationships. So we heard earlier that this, as the relationship started going south and as someone started feeling unloved, they tried to become the perfect man or the perfect woman. And the more that you try to become the perfect man or the perfect woman, you're trying really hard, you're investing in this relationship, the other person is not. The more responsibility you take of carrying the relationship on your shoulders, the less responsibility they have. And so now suddenly, like, you're doing all the work, and so, like, what are they going to do? They're going to, like, start AFKing. They're going to start chilling, right? Because you're doing all the work. And then the cycle gets worse and worse. The more emotionally checked out they are because you're doing all the heavy lifting, the more you feel like you're not doing a good job because they're checked out. And the more you feel like they're checked out, the harder you have to work to be a better partner. And so then you up it up. You up it a notch. And once you up it a notch, they AFK even more. And the cycle repeats itself and it's doomed. So you should try hard in a relationship. You just shouldn't do their share of the trying. Because one person cannot make a relationship work. It requires two people. The last thing that I want to point out to y'all is we can introspect and we can study ourselves and we can watch videos on the internet or things like that. But if y'all really pay attention, the real learning happens when you speak. So I can listen to someone else and I can say, oh, that's very useful. But when you start speaking and you start putting things together, when there's a dialogue that's back and forth, that's when the real learning happens. Right? So we've seen this in all kinds of different relationships. So you see this, for example, in the mentorship relationship where your mentor asks you, what do you want from life? You see this in parent-child relationships that are hopefully healthy, where your parents are like, tell me, what was hard at school today? And as you vocalize that kind of stuff, that's when things really get settled. We see this in the therapeutic relationship where, doctors are trained listeners whose job it is to ask you questions and sort of help you form connections and stuff like that. That's what we have in our coaching program as well. These are people who are trained listeners who have evolved, we basically taught them to get you to articulate your thoughts and feelings. As you articulate your thoughts, your feelings, your motivations, your goals, as you start saying it, it becomes more real and the neurons start connecting. And once the neurons start connecting, that's when behavior changes. The challenge of learning things passively on the internet is, if you guys paid attention to our interview with Eric or talk with Eric, it's the cognitive bias that you miss. And that's what's really going to ruin the relationship going forward. It's really hard to see your own cognitive bias, even if you're as intelligent and as introspective as Eric is. And so what we've discovered is that there's a whole array of interventions that allow people to actually grow and actually improve. It starts with information. So Twitch, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. You have to have an idea of something. Then there's a little bit more kind of intensive involvement, right? So you start getting involved. So that's where we have things like Social Sandbox on Discord, where you can literally practice pragmatic communication skills, how to speak, how to ask, how to interrupt other people, things like that. And then there's the actual deep introspective work of okay, let's figure out what's going on in your head. What are the patterns in your life? And what can we do about them? And that's where coaching comes in. So hopefully we all learned something. I really appreciate Eric's participation in our community. I think he's an awesome person. And I really am hopeful for him. And for those of y'all that are feeling a little bit insecure and or conflict avoidant and stuff like that, hopefully that was helpful for you as well. especially this business, because I see this a lot in our community as well, where one person is over invested in the relationship. And when you're over invested in the relationship, all you're doing is allowing for the other person to leave. So great call. All right, Tech Teller, let's do next.
Oh,
Hello.
Hello.
I'm a little bit nervous, but you can call me Yella.
Yella?
Yeah,
Welcome,
that's
Yella.
fine. I'm just scrolling again for the prompt was, what do you want to work on in yourself the most? And my answer was, I want to be less dependent on others and lose the always present feeling that friends could backstab or abandon me. I want to figure out what matters to me and be content without the approval of my friends. I want to be able to help myself like I help my friends.
So, okay, so you want to be less dependent on other people. You want to be able to help yourself like you help your friends. And you said something after being less dependent, something about constantly thinking about something.
Yeah, thinking about that people could abandon me,
Yeah.
like,
Help me understand that a little bit. That sounds like how can I say this?
well,
It sounds very stressful to have friends that your mind is constantly thinking that way.
yeah, it is. I think it just roots a lot in insecurities, and a lot of the time I don't have many friends, but uh, just if people don't text me back like a few days, or just if there's uh, if it's not like there isn't a balance between the amount of communication between each other. I sometimes just get the feeling that I did something wrong, or the people don't want to hang out with me a lot more, and yeah, it's just always it stresses me out a lot that because I have so few friends that maybe I can lose them as well. So
Okay, so what I'm hearing, Yella, is that first of all, it sounds like you can't afford to lose many friends, right? So
yeah, because
each one becomes more and more important.
yeah,
The second thing that I'm noticing is that if there's ever a question mark about a relationship, like let's say you text your friend and your friend doesn't text you back in 2 or 3 days, that even though there are a lot of reasons why your friend may not text you back, that your mind tends to think about some really scary stuff.
exactly, and mostly scary stuff about things that put me down.
Can you give me an example of what kind of thoughts your mind has?
Just a simple example, like if I meet with another person, and I'm always after I meet with another person, I feel really attached to them, and the next day I text a lot, and if they for some reason don't have time on the next day, and uh, I think that maybe I said something wrong, or that it just wasn't fun when we hang out the day before, and yeah.
Okay. And what would you so what would you like to change if your life was different? If I could give you a magic wand and you could change yourself into something else, what would you change yourself into?
Honestly, it's just it's just I think it's just my mind that makes a lot of these assumptions, and that I really know that those aren't really what's happening, but they're really yeah, taking up a lot of my energy and stressing me out, and just want to live without them.
Okay.
But
So I'd love to try to help you with that today, Yella, and I think I can, but I'm going to ask a couple other questions first. Is that okay?
yeah,
So can you also tell me, Yella, ballpark, how old are you?
I'm 33.
Okay. So do you have a sense of where this fear that your friends are going to abandon or backstab you comes from?
I have some, but I'm not sure. I think one reason is that, of course, there were situations in the past where something like this happens, and also I, for my part, abandoned a lot of my friends just because at one point I wasn't happy with my. It was just a lot of friends going out partying, and I wasn't able to control it and needed to really take a step back from that friend group. And another time when I really had like a depressive episode, and I really couldn't became really alone, didn't leave my house, and that's when I really like abandoned all of my friends that were left. Yeah.
Okay. And okay. So it does sound like you've had a couple of very real experiences where relationships that were important to you fell apart in some way.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, when you, let's say you meet someone and as you said, you feel attached and then you text them a lot the next day or message them a lot the next day, what happens after that?
Uh, uh, I don't have really just because I really just now I'm really getting back into socializing. I don't have really
Okay.
that much experiences.
Okay. So, so when you say you get attached to someone, what does that mean?
Like I just want to hang out a lot with them, or and yeah.
Great. Thank you. So let me ask you one or two questions. So what about that makes you want to hang out with them? How do you feel when you're with them that makes you want more?
Just the feelings that I have when I'm alone, that people will abandon me, are not there because they're right in front of me, and I can see it that they're with me, they're having fun with me, and I don't have to stress about if they really um, want to spend time with me because they're spending time with me.
I see. So what I'm almost hearing is that there's almost a constant voice of doubt in your mind that people don't want to spend time with you, you may not have friends, they'd rather have fun with someone else. And when you actually spend time with people, that voice actually quiets down because you get a lot of feedback from your eyes, from your ears that, okay, this person is having a good time. We are having fun. So like that part of you, the fear of abandonment quiets down when you're actually with someone.
Yeah, sure. Sometimes when I'm out with something, there's also some small little thoughts that I think, are they having fun right now? Is this really a good time right now? But it's not so severe as when I'm alone and don't have constant feedback.
Okay. Yella, anything else you want to mention?
Um,
You know, I was going to share some thoughts with you, but I just wanted to make sure that we covered what you wanted to share.
no, just
Okay.
no, I'm good.
So I do think that this can be managed, but I think it's going to be hard. So I think the basic problem is that your solution is actually creating your problem. Okay? So I'll explain what that means. So you have this fear of abandonment. And when you spend time with someone and that fear, and you feel better, what do you think that's actually doing to the fear of abandonment? The more time you spend with them, do you feel reassured?
Yeah, but also I don't know how to put this, but you said earlier that I have the feeling that I can't afford to lose a friend, and if I spend more time with somebody, they get like more valuable to me because.
Well, yep, we'll get to that in a second. But what I want to kind of point out, so I'm going to share with you a story. This is a story. If you've watched Dr. K's Guide, you may have heard this before.
Okay.
So when we have anxiety, there are certain things that we can do that will decrease our anxiety over time, or certain things that we can do that will calm down our anxiety, but will actually increase it over time. So I'll give you an example. So I have a family member who's very, very anxious about their kid's safety. And so what they do is if the kid isn't home at 8 p.m., they'll start messaging their child. Hey, are you okay? Is everything okay? I'm worried about you. You said you were going to be home at 8. It's now 8:03 and you're not home. Where are you? You need to pick up the phone. And until the child picks up the phone, the parent is very, very anxious. And when the child picks up the phone and the child says, no, I'm fine. I just stopped to get gas. I'm 5 minutes away. The next day, the parent, when the child is 5 minutes late, again, that day, the parent isn't confident. Their anxiety actually comes right back. Does that make sense?
No, I didn't quite follow.
Okay.
Sorry.
So this is where, all right, let me give you another example. So this is the one from Dr. K's Guide. So I was once working with someone who was afraid that their boyfriend or fiance was cheating on them. So what they did is they were like, okay, like, I have no reason to believe this, but they had been cheated on in the past. So they were concerned that their fiance was cheating on them. And so eventually what they did is they checked their fiance's phone without their knowledge. They opened up their phone, checked their text messages, and found that nothing was going on. That was like, there was no cheating going on. No, naked pictures or anything like that. And so they felt better for a couple of days, but then the thoughts came back. And then they checked the phone again. And once again, they didn't see any evidence of cheating. But the more time they went on, the more they found that they started checking their phone every single day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I get the urge to increase the frequency when I see other people.
Yep. So there's an interesting thing that happens with anxiety where sometimes giving in to the anxiety actually makes it grow. And the way that we give into it is by actually reassuring it in some way. So if you're terrified that people don't like you and you spend time with them, what you're actually doing is feeding that anxiety. Because you're telling the anxiety, see, look, if you're worried about it, let me go spend time with someone and then you'll see. But then the anxiety never becomes confident. It just needs that constant external reassurance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I need to be able to reassure myself without seeing them.
Absolutely. Right? And this is the tricky thing, because when you go and spend time with someone, half of your mind is still thinking about the anxiety. It's satisfied, but it's not spending time with the person, right? You're thinking about what the person thinks. You're thinking about, oh, thank God I'm not abandoned. Thank God that this person likes me and enjoys spending time with me. But you're still thinking about the anxiety. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to an extent. like I'm still having a good time most of the time, and
Yep, you're also having a good time, but still a part of your mind, it's not like you're all having a good time. A part of your mind is thinking about, oh, good. The fact that I'm having a good time means I don't need to be worried.
yeah,
But the problem is that even when you do that, and we sort of see that pattern, is that you get attached to them, right? Why do you get attached to them after one day? It's because they fulfill your need in terms of that anxiety. So you're not even getting attached to a human. You're getting attached to a source of soothing for your anxiety. Does that
yeah,
make sense?
yes,
And then the next day goes around, and what do? You start messaging them a lot because you need your fix again, right? You almost become addicted to that relationship. And the reason you get addicted, why do we form addictions? Because they make our negative feelings go away,
yeah,
right? You following
yeah,
me?
yes.
So there are a couple things. Any questions so far?
No,
Okay.
go ahead.
So next thing is that, well, first thing that I want you to do is the next day, you need to really recognize what behaviors are coming from your anxiety. Whether they're good or bad or whatever, you need to recognize, okay, imagine that you have this hungry beast inside you, which is your fear of abandonment. And when you send that first message, where is that message coming from? Is it coming from you or is it coming from the hungry beast? Because chances are, if you're sending a bunch of messages the next day because you want to hang out again, I think that's going to be coming from the hungry beast. And the tricky thing is that that may drive people away.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And then what happens? Once you drive someone away by texting them too much, the hungry beast gets even hungrier. And now it says, oh my God, another person has abandoned you, Yella. We can't have that happen again. And the next time you go out and you meet someone new, the hungry beast is saying, don't screw it up, don't screw it up, don't screw it up, or they won't abandon you, or they'll abandon you again. And so then you listen to that and you're like, okay, I promise I'm not going to screw it up. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be fun. We're going to have a great time. Ha 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 ha. See, I'm making them laugh. See, they like me. It's okay. They're not going to abandon me, hungry beast. And then the hungry beast is like, okay. And then the next day comes around, the hungry beast is like, message them. If they had such a good time, they'll see you again. I'm tired of feeling this way. And the one thing that can make this feeling go away is if when you spend time with them. So then the tricky thing happens. When a relationship becomes about meeting your emotional needs, that's when the other person no longer exists in the relationship. Because now the reason that you're texting them is because you're tired of feeling alone. And now you're placing the burden, the emotional burden of your loneliness on this person.
yeah, of course. I sometimes I really feel like I'm very selfish because um, when I tell others how I feel, it's just like I'm voicing my needs, my things that I need, and even like mostly, uh, I don't know what I was saying.
No. Yeah, it's a good point. So this is the thing. So it is being selfish, but here's the key thing. In a good relationship, you're allowed to be selfish. You're allowed to be selfish 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time, it's your job to be selfless.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't blame you for wanting, like, you have those emotional needs. It's just you need to be a little bit careful about letting them dictate your interactions with other people. So I know it sounds very like, so some concrete advice. One is it's okay for you to hang out with someone, but the next day, I would not send them a bunch of messages.
Yeah, like I recognize the next day problem already, and like sometimes I try to just not text them, but as soon as they text me, it's like I text them like 5 things at once, and it's like, okay, now they've texted me, now I have a free pass to text them how much I want.
Exactly. So that's all the stuff in your head, right? So now the hungry beast has learned if we text them first, they may abandon us. But the second
Yeah.
they text us, it's like, okay, like, nom, 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 give it to me, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me.
Yeah.
Right? And and the reason we're getting this far, Yella, by the way, is because it's clear to me that you've figured a lot of this stuff out, right? You even told me without me even asking, yeah, then I feel like I have to text them the next day and I text them too much. So now what you've got to do is like take it one step further. And I think the key thing is that pay attention to that need within you. And try to figure out, okay, like now I can text them. What's telling me that I need to text them? Even if you can, that's fine. But where is that need coming from? It's coming from like this part of me that feels incredibly alone.
Yeah.
And then I love what you said is that I wish I could be for myself what I can be for other people. You said something like that, right? I wish I could help myself the way that I help other people.
Yeah.
And so what would you tell a friend who was in your situation?
The first thing would be probably like, don't worry that much, but that also, I don't know, it invalidates my feelings and emotions, so I'm not sure if that's the right thing to say, but yeah.
Yeah. So a good point. So we can help you a little bit concretely there. So this is what I'd say to you, and you should say this to yourself, that I understand why you feel so afraid. And just because you feel afraid doesn't actually make it real.
Yeah.
Right? So if I've been bitten by a dog and I see a dog the next day and I get scared, my fear is completely valid, even though the dog is not dangerous.
Yeah.
So this is where you don't want to invalidate your perspective, but you also don't want to live your life wholly based on that perspective. So what I would really do is have a conversation with yourself and say, okay, how are we going to navigate this? Because on the one hand, I completely understand why you're terrified. Because after all, you're me. On the other hand, if we live our life being controlled by this feeling, I don't think we're going to create the healthy relationships that we really want. So what can we do in terms of texting? Like, I don't think we should send them 6 different texts. What would you really want to send them? What do you really feel like you want to, like, because it sounds like maybe getting together with them is really useful, like you really enjoyed that. So maybe we can send them 1 or 2 texts, one about how we had a lot of fun yesterday, and a second one about, hey, maybe we can get together sometime soon. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of weird, but like you almost want to have a conversation with yourself where you're not stupid, you're not crazy. The fear of abandonment is absolutely there for a reason. And also, we don't want our life to be dictated by that fear. Because the problem is when the fear of abandonment controls our behavior, we actually end up driving a lot of people away.
Yeah, and it's just not driving people away. At the moment, I'm really, I I have fear of getting to know new people because they would just stress me out more because it's another person that I want to keep, or most of them I want to keep in my life, and I have to struggle with myself that I keep them. Yeah.
Yep. And that's really dangerous, right? Because I mean, I think some of this is maybe a translation issue, but you know, when you use the word keep, there's a certain possessiveness to that, right? And what I'd love for you to be able to do one day, Yella, is recognize that you bring value to any relationship. And also that may not be the value that some people are looking for, which is actually okay. Just because someone doesn't want to spend time with you doesn't mean that you aren't worth spending time with.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it can be hard for that to sink in. When that really sinks in, you'll be completely better. But it'll take time to get there.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you have like nearly to no friends, you're glad for everyone that spends time with you and shows interest in you, and yeah,
Yeah, and that's where the attachment kind of comes in, because I think all this gets, you know, if you're thirsty and in the desert and you finally find water, you're going to be very possessive of that water. And so I think the challenge that you face is that you genuinely have a need which is so severe that you're not going to want to let any opportunity for getting that need met. You don't want to let it go. And that creates problems. Can I share a story with you, Yella?
yeah, sure.
So, sometimes when I worked as a psychiatrist, I would work with kids who were in orphanages or foster homes. Do you know what that means?
Yeah,
Okay.
like people with no parents.
Right. So they lived in this home, right, where there's like one caretaker and there's 30 kids. And oftentimes there wasn't enough food. So for example, like the meals were like very limited. There wasn't a whole lot in terms of snacks. It's like one person kind of cooking and they're also trying to like make money. So they skimp on meals and things like that. And so one of the kids that was in there ended up getting adopted by a family. So they moved to their new home, right, where their parents are there, and the parents feed them whatever they want. So or not whatever, but they have meals and there's a pantry and they've got snacks in there, and they tell the kid, you can come and you can get whatever food you want. And the parents kept on finding ants in the child's room. And so they were confused about why there are ants there, and what they see is that there are portions of food from dinner and snacks and things like that have been wrapped in paper towels and kept in drawers, kept under the bed, that the child was storing food in their room, half-eaten food. So when the parents, they'd eat dinner and there'd be some bread, and the child would take the bread, wrap it in a napkin and put it in their pocket. And then they'd go and they'd put that food kind of in the drawer. Does that make sense? Are you following me?
Yeah.
So the parents come to me and they're like, we think the kid has some problem because he's hoarding. They thought he was a hoarder, where he's just not letting stuff go. It's causing problems and things like that. And that's where we spent some time talking to the kid. The kid was 7. So, I talked to him some, but we sort of realized that this child basically has an insecurity where they've gone hungry for the first 7 years of their life. And so when they've got hungry, they've created certain kinds of adaptations to survive. But those adaptations aren't really healthy, right? Even though there's a bunch of a bunch of food in the pantry, the child still, for their own safety, has to take the food and store it, because they don't know how long this magical pantry full of food is going to last. Because for 7 years, they haven't had access to that. And then they go to this new place where suddenly, I can eat whatever I want to. What's the catch? How are you trying to trick me? Is this a scam in some way? You're just saying that today, but of course you're going to take it away. And so in that same way, I almost see an element of this in you, that you're so hungry for friendship that you're going to hold on to whatever you get your hands on, even though you don't realize that, Yella, there are hundreds, thousands of people out there who you can form friendships with.
Yeah, but it's not only I'm afraid of that the friends will go away. It's I worked a lot on myself, personal development in the last year,
Good.
and right now I have the feeling I can put so much energy into relationships, and I have this fear there will be times when I'm uh, will be worse off again and don't have that much energy, and um, I fear that when that day comes, that yeah, I can't put that much energy, and like then they will abandon me. So it feels like I need to yeah, bond like extra hard.
Yes, of course.
So
You don't know how long that pantry is going to be open to you.
yeah,
You better get as much food as you can now. You have to
yeah,
bond extra hard, right? Because in the future, it's not going to be possible.
yeah, and like I
So,
know.
yeah, so I get you. So, what do you think that's doing to your desperation, the neediness?
It becomes bigger.
Absolutely. As the need becomes bigger, the attachment becomes bigger. As the attachment becomes bigger, you're going to send 6 messages because the need is that much greater. I can't afford to just send 4. It needs to be 5. It needs to be 6. I can't let this person slip away. It's all the same thing, Yella.
Yeah,
And I know it's really hard. That's why, like, I can't argue with that part of you, right? If I said, oh, Yella, you've got 40 years to make friends, that part of you is not going to listen. Even though technically it's like you've got your whole life to make friends.
yeah, but making friends is hard, and
Yeah, but like
keeping friends is harder. Yeah,
yeah, right? But that's your experience. So for me to say you've got 40 years to make friends, like that doesn't matter because in your experience, the time is running out. And that's where like really it's hard detachment, man. That's where it's like, okay, if the time is running out, it's going to run out. And if I'm going to be lonely, I'm going to be lonely. But in this moment, I have an opportunity to spend time with one person and I'm going to make the most of today. And interestingly enough, when you start thinking that way and you start not worrying about whether this person will be available tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, oh my God, if I don't act nice enough today, this person won't be my friend. And then 2 years from now, I'm not going to have any energy to make friends. And then I'll be 35, and then I'll be 41, and then I'll be 46. And if I'm 46 and I have no friends, then no one's going to want to be my friend. And all of these thoughts will come bubbling up. But the core
yeah,
thing is still when you sit with someone, they can't fix all of those problems for you.
yeah. But to some extent, I also feel like sometimes I feel like maybe it's better for myself to be alone because it's so much harder when I engage with other people that sometimes I just think being alone would just make things a lot easier.
Oh, definitely. Right? If only you could be content in being alone.
Well, I think I can, but I don't know.
Yeah, Yella, my heart goes out to you, my friend. I think that it's, how can I say this? One of the most horrible adaptations that a human being can have is to be okay without something that they need. And so the humans are resilient. You'll learn how to be alone. But I really hope that you don't have a life where you're forced to learn how to survive with loneliness.
I hope so too.
And I think the key thing here is just acknowledging every moment that those thoughts are telling you to do something, and as best as you can, resist it a little bit. And the one thing that I can tell you is that the more you resist it, the easier it will be to resist. Where in the same way that you feed it every day and it grows, the more that you let your anxiety go hungry, you don't give into it by sending the text message, it'll actually start to shrink. It'll be a painful shrinkage because anytime it's shrinking, it's hungry and it's not getting what it needs. And it's going to like give you hell. But it'll eventually shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, and then eventually it'll disappear.
Yeah. It's hard because it's always on my mind. I want to make sure, and in the morning I think about it, and throughout the day I always think that I need the reassurance from others
Yeah,
that they're
so
still here.
it certainly sounds hard. It sounds like it's a very dominating part of your mind.
Yes.
And it sounds, honestly, it almost sounds like torture to me.
At the moment, it really feels like this, and it really made me also doubt what I did over the last year, because this feeling is new to me. Like I was like you said, I was content with being alone. I was miserable in other ways, but yeah, uh, it's really hard right now.
I hear that, man. I'm so sorry. I don't
Thank
know if
you.
I've been able to help you so far, but what do you think?
Yeah, a little bit. Um, honestly, it feels good, but haven't really taken it all into my mind. But yeah,
No, I,
just
I I mean, just if I can disagree there, I think you did take it into your mind. I think it's just not enough, right?
yeah,
What I'm
yeah.
really, the more that I listen to you now, I'm just noticing how big the mountain you have to climb really is.
Oh, it's big.
And I don't know what else to say besides, even if it feels kind of hopeless to you, it doesn't feel quite as hopeless to me. But at the same time, I also acknowledge that you know it better than I do. Right? So even if you do feel hopeless, I think it's actually like okay to feel that way because you're the one who's had to struggle with this.
Yeah,
And if you can, I'd say, sit with that hopelessness and don't necessarily give into it. But it's very easy for me to say, oh no, there's lots of opportunities to make friends. Believe in yourself, yalla. Believe in yourself and make friends and everything will be okay. When what I'm really noticing is that it's very heavy what you carry around.
yeah. It feels like I'm at the moment climbing the mountain, and like at the halfway point, it's like it gets so much harder, and I think maybe I should just roll down back into the valley and go to sleep. And
I don't think you should do that, but I think you've earned yourself a break. Right? So you've climbed halfway up the mountain. I'm surprised you said halfway. I was expecting I just started climbing the mountain. But
no, I did a lot of other things besides the social things. Like I lost 40 kilo. I don't know what that's in
that's
uh,
awesome.
American units, but I improved my health by a lot. Like a year ago, I wasn't able to really leave my house that much, and yeah,
The
yeah,
fuck?
yeah. But it's hard right now. I know that I did a lot of stuff, and like my mind always tells me. I know that it's really awesome what I did, but there's always these uh, thoughts in my mind that uh, it it only made it like worse, or it's way harder now, and sometimes I have the feeling, why did I even start? Because maybe I was just more content playing video games all day, and just not having a life than having an life of struggle.
Wait, Yellow, you weren't leaving the house a year ago and you lost 40 kilos?
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
it's nice. It's awesome.
Do you really believe that it's awesome?
Yeah, like yeah, but it's also just like it's halfway the mountain, and really awesome is when I'm up on the mountain.
Okay,
That's
one last thing
yeah.
I'm going to share with you because apparently you're a Giga Chad too. You just
Okay.
pretended to be a noob this whole time. So I don't want to devalue your friendship struggles, but there's one other thing that I want you to understand about the mind.
Yeah.
Sometimes when there's a part of ourselves who hates us, okay? So when we get abandoned by people, what do we start thinking about ourselves?
Like we are not lovable. That we are,
Absolutely. And then if you start putting your life together, what is that part of your mind going to do?
I don't know.
It's going to panic and it's going to start launching nuclear weapons. Because this whole time, we've built my life on the idea that I'm unlovable and I'm a piece of crap. And then if you start putting your life together, that part of your mind will fight you with every weapon it's got. Because suddenly you're about to, this whole thing exists because you are worthless. That's its lifeblood. It's its energy. And if you start having confidence against for yourself, it's going to fight you as hard as it can. Does that make any sense to you?
A little bit. So what you're saying is that it wants me to have no confidence. It wants to stay
Yes.
like
Right? What it wants to do is it's trying to convince you, roll down the mountain and go to sleep in the valley. Like, what the fuck, man? You're halfway up. And it's telling you to throw away all of your work. It's telling you to go back to where you were a year ago.
yeah. That's really dumb. I don't want to be there.
But this is
again.
what you've got to understand is that part of you wants to survive too. So there's one thing that I'm going to share with you before we kind of wrap up because we've got to get to another caller. So
Yeah.
one thing I've noticed is when people put their lives together and they really don't believe in themselves, there's something that I call the rubber band of self-development. So it's like I'm tied to a tree and I'm tied by a rubber band. And the harder I walk away from the tree, the rubber band snaps me back even harder. So I'll run and I'll run and I'll run, and then I'll get like 10 feet away from the tree or 3 meters away from the tree, 4 meters away from the tree. And as I get 4 meters away from the tree, the rubber band's elasticity pulls me back, and I come sliding back to where I started. And I've seen this time and time again with people who start to put their lives together. You get out of your depression, you clean your house, you apply for a job, you go to work, you stay there for the first 2 weeks, you get hired, 2 more weeks go by, and then suddenly you're like, something panics, and then you stop showing up at work. You stay at home, you play video games, you eat a bunch of junk food, and then you go back to your misery.
Yeah, these things happen, but the band gets more. It's easier the next time when you get back.
Are you giving me words of hope and encouragement about continuing to move forward? Because it's going to get easier
Yeah.
next time?
Yeah, but sometimes you move backwards, but it's okay because it's easier the next time.
All right, if you say so.
I made the experience. You had something like if a alcoholic first gets sober, he's like sober for 1 day. The next time he's sober uh, for 2 weeks, and then he's sober for a little month. Like it gets better every time. You can't get it all right the first time, and yeah.
Okay, do you think that applies to making friends too?
Yeah, but it's hard every time it doesn't work out, and
Okay, so Yella, this is what I want you to do. You said that you want to help yourself the way that you help other people.
Yeah.
All you need to do is go watch the VOD of this conversation. And what you just did over the last 5 minutes is you helped like everyone who's listening.
Okay.
So I think you're going to be fine. I think it's going to be hard. I think you've had a lot of suffering pile up in your life. And the weight of that is very heavy. And you wouldn't be able to carry it unless you lost that 40 kilos. But without those 40 kilos, you could carry this crap and keep moving, buddy.
I hope so. Yeah.
That's
I think
all.
I will.
That's all we can ask for, right?
Yeah.
Good luck to you, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
I didn't do anything. You're the one. You showed up here having lost 40 kilos. And we're like a shot in a year ago. I'll take credit for what I do, but I think like honestly, 95% of it, 99% of you has been you, bro.
Okay. Yeah. Then thanks for giving me the opportunity to present myself, I guess.
Thank you very much, Yella.
Okay.
Take care.
See you. Thanks.
What? I don't even know what the hell happened there. It is what it is. Like, I don't even know what to say. Like, so clearly, Yalla has had a lot of stuff not go their way. Right? And also, they're absolutely crushing it. And who knows? I don't know what to say. Like, this is why, like, it's hard to describe. So in a live conversation, like, sometimes these things happen. So when I work with people, right, we see this in coaches too. We'll, like, work with people, like, we don't know exactly what we're doing. We don't really know how it works. But, like, I just don't know how to say it. Like, this is why we started this program. Like, this is why we have live interaction with other human beings. Because you can spend a lot of time with someone, and it just feels like nothing's working. And then suddenly, like, something weird happens, and then you start thinking about things in a different way. I don't know how to explain this. You just have to see it. And, like, this is the cool thing, is that this can happen consistently. It's all about what's up here. The thing is, it's just weird, man. I'm blown away by that guy. So, One Piece Addict is saying his abandonment fears don't get fixed by him losing weight, though. Well said, right? So the fear of abandonment is different. The thing, though, is that the fear of abandonment is rooted in self-worth, right? So, like, where does the fear of abandonment come from? It comes from this idea that I'm not worth other people sticking around. Putting your life together, climbing halfway up the mountain. He's the one who said it was halfway. And losing 40 kilos absolutely affects self-worth. And then even at the end, when I ask him, well, like, but how do you feel about, he's like, every time you lose ground, like, it gets easier the next time. But I was like, but what about friends, right? I debated him. I was like, hey, part of you that wants to be abandoned, this is your chance to say, yeah, that's true for weight, but it's not true for friendships. I gave him the opportunity to say, yeah, that's like, it's completely apples and oranges. But he didn't take it. He was like, well, I have some hope. Right? And this is the thing, like, good point. But, like, I think when we get stuck in our own heads, we do not realize how awesome we are. Right? I don't think, and for the record, I don't think the mods, like, screened that, right? Like, do y'all get that? They send, like, a prompt, and they read it out at the beginning. It's not like the mods are screening people. By the way, who's had a 40-kilo weight loss in the last year? We're going to pick you to come on. I'm pretty sure mods had no clue. This is the thing, is that each and every one of you who thinks that your life is absolute crap, and each and every one of you that is weighed down by all these fears and negative emotions and stuff like that, you don't realize, y'all get that with these call-in streams, we call in random randos from our community. It's not like we pick the 5% of gigachads. The whole point is that we're all gigachads. Right? And you just don't see it. Each and every one of us is absolutely amazing. I believe that. I'm not saying that because I'm some friggin' Dr. K optimist. Like, oh, like Dr. K, like believe in all people. No, crap like this happens where I'm like, man, this guy is screwed. And then he's like, by the way, I did this, this, and this. And then you work with people time and time and time again, and you expect them to be like, you know, because they say something, right? So like, oh, I'm struggling and I'm pathetic and I'm depressed. And you're like, oh, okay, so I guess that means you're struggling and pathetic and depressed. And then you're like, wait a minute. No, hold on a second. This person is none of those things. This person is resilient. They're strong. They're intelligent. They're capable. They're compassionate. We've even had some people who have been reviled by the internet. Like, so we did an interview with a Trump supporter, and everyone was expecting this person, because everyone like vilifies Trump supporters, right? So clearly this person who's a diehard Trump supporter must be a terrible human being. No, amazing human being, incredibly inspiring. And this is the thing. The reason I have faith in humanity is not because I'm an optimist. It's because I've spent a lot of time with a lot of humanity, and each and every person is amazing in some way. Like, that's not like me being optimistic. That's me just being surprised over and over and over again. And I still get surprised. I got surprised today. I don't know what to... I mean, it's what keeps it interesting for me, I guess, but... Original username 2300 is asking, why are we insecure with the good things in life? Great question. So 2 or 3 things. The first is that sometimes when we're wallowing in the mud, there's a part of us that likes it. And the prospect of actually improving our lives is absolutely terrifying. Because as long as I'm depressed, or as long as I'm incapable, or as long as I'm, you know, whatever I blame for my circumstances. If my life is crap, then I can blame that thing. But if I start to put together my life, then what does that mean? Well, does that mean that I'm not truly lazy? Well, like, that's kind of like hard from a cognitive dissonance standpoint. The reason that we love our insecurities and we hate our progress is because once we start making progress in our life, we have to take responsibility for it. And once we start taking responsibility for our life, does that give us control over our life? Absolutely. But it also makes us responsible for the previous crap. So if I spent 10 years trying to figure my life out, and at the age of 33, I put my life together and start on the right path, then when I turn 37 and I look back on the 10 years that I wasted, I don't got no one to blame but myself for that. And dealing with that can be terrifying. Oh my God, I've loved my life so much for the last 5 years. I can't believe I could have been living like this all along. I wasted my 20s trapped in this fog. And so sometimes in a weird way, it's almost ego protective for us to like sabotage ourselves. But like we were sabotaging anyway. You can sabotage for 10 years or you can sabotage for 20. It's your choice. Take responsibility today. Shape what you can today. And the truth of the matter is that Yalla and like other people in this community, like, it's not their fault that they have a fear of abandonment. Right? These fears that we have are given to us. They're our brain's ability to adapt as best as it can. So even if we look at the human body, when I break a bone, unless I set the bone externally, it doesn't heal properly. And it's crooked for the rest of my life. It heals the best that it can. The problem is that when we have psychological problems, we have no splints. We have no way to set our mind the right way to recover properly. So when I have a breakup, I don't have the right splint or cast so that my mind grows back in a better way from the breakup. If I'm not careful, what'll happen is I'll slip into all men are evil or all women are evil or whatever. Some kind of like stunted view of humanity. Because that's just the way that it naturally grows back when it's hurt. Right? It's not the way it's supposed to. It's just the body, in the same way that our leg can grow back crooked, our mind can grow back crooked. And so going back and undoing that work takes time. Anyway, we've got time for one more, Kabir. These are running long today, so please extend my apologies to everyone who's in the waiting room.
Will do.
Man, these are so good and there's so many people. Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks.
What do you go by, friend?
I go by Snow.
Snow?
Yeah.
Cool. So what are you working on, Snow?
Yeah, so my prompt was I want to work on moving on from the contemplative to preparation stage of change. I've been trying to change for many years, and I think I have decent awareness into myself, but it's still not enough to make me want to take action.
Okay. Wow, that was very well thought out.
Thank you.
You sound can you explain to us what the contemplative versus preparation stages are?
Yeah, although like full disclosure, I have a slide up, so I'm gonna
Sure.
just like read off of that. So the contemplative stage of change is where you're aware the problem exists, but you don't have commitment to action. And the preparation stage of change is when you're intent on taking action to address the problem.
Okay. Very well said. So you're aware that there's a problem, but you're not motivated to take action.
Yeah, or there's like a strong resistance.
Okay. Is there a strong resistance?
Yeah, there is a strong resistance, and I'm even aware of like the different factors of that resistance, but even that is not enough to make me want to change.
Okay. Can we go into some details, Snow?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess like I actually want to say that the previous the previous caller kind of helped a bit more and is kind of related to my situation, but just with a different detail. So
Okay.
yeah, just to go into a little bit more detail about my situation, it's that so I'm really struggling in terms of changing with my belief towards money and how it ties to survival. Because it's weird because I didn't grow up poor or anything. I like grew up middle class. So it's weird because I don't feel like I have any strong negative early childhood stuff related to that. So I don't really know where that
Sure.
strong belief came from, but I have this like I've been saving since I was a little kid, and so maybe it was like the ego sit and tonic stuff that really built up, plus later negative stuff happened. But basically, sorry, just my belief around money is that so currently I'm unemployed, but I've been working full time. I was working full time for about like 4 to 5 years. And I was burnt out from my job and possibly the whole industry as well. But I'm really having trouble because like I've tried several times. So I even like tried part-time options just to see if it will work better with the burnout and stuff. But I found that it still didn't work in terms of like pressure and stuff like that. And I'm trying to find like, trying to career change and stuff like that. But there's this part of me that like doesn't want to work, honestly. And there's also the part of me that like lacks direction, and that's the thing about myself. It's like I find it hard. Yeah, I find it very hard to know. Well, it's like no. I do know some things that I want, but I think the resistance to money, but also spending money, is one big factor that holds me back.
Okay. So when you say so when you say you want to move on to preparation, what's your goal? So what do you want to be able to do that you're not able to do right now?
I think my goal is either to be okay, because I have some savings, like probably not enough to last me the rest of my life, but at least I can go for a few years, especially because I still live with my dad right now. So either one option is to be okay with, like kind of be okay with taking it slow, because I also find that I'm quite impatient. Option two is like, I guess you could say the ideal or what I think I should be doing, which is like, to find a better job that suits me more.
Okay. All right. So let me understand. So can I think for a second, Snow?
Yeah.
Thank you for calling in today, by the way.
No, I'm so happy I got chosen somehow. Yeah, I feel very grateful too.
Yeah, it makes me sad that I'm glad people feel grateful, but it makes me sad that we don't have enough time to get to, everyone who has questions. But anyway, that's not to distract. Okay. So first thing let me just think for a second.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I want to point out is I think there are two separate things here. And I think part of the reason why it may be hard for you to move on from contemplative is because it's almost like either option is good, but they're in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because I'm sort of noticing that, okay, one way, so let's take a step back and talk about stages of change for a second. Awesome PowerPoint, by the way, loved it. So oftentimes when we look at someone's motivation and their ability to change behavior, what we've sort of discovered scientifically is that there are a lot of cognitive stages that people go through before they can take action. And one of the biggest problems that people run into is that unless you understand where someone is in their stages of change, certain things may work and certain things may not work. So the simplest example, the stages of change model really developed with addictions. And what we found is that people who are alcoholics, for example, telling them to go to an AA meeting and get sober and stuff like that, which is like the preparation and action stage, didn't work if they were pre-contemplative, which means they didn't know that they had a problem. So giving someone solutions, like talking to a 15-year-old kid who wants to be a CSGO pro and telling them that they have to stop failing classes and they need to pass their classes, isn't going to work because pre-contemplative, they just don't think it's a problem. They're like, no, I'm going to be a pro. I don't need to study. So the first stage is pre-contemplative, which is when people don't have insight or awareness that a problem even exists. The second stage is contemplative, which is now I'm aware that there's a problem, but I'm conflicted about it. So there's a part of me that wants to change, but there's a part of me that wants to stay the same. Then we move on to preparation, which is when someone is like, okay, I absolutely do want to change. Now we have to figure out how to change. What's the best way? My biggest issue with what you're saying, Snow, is that I think you're you're contemplative in two different issues that lead you in opposite directions. So one is the value of money. What is your relationship with money? The second is whether you should have a job, have a career change, and burnout. But it's almost like you're lumping those two together. Does that?
I think because the way I see it, the career change relates to money, because at the end of it, it's about like survival for me.
Yeah, I understand. I understand how they're related, but do you see how it's kind of like, so do you want to change your relationship with money, or do you want to give in to your relationship with money and find a new career?
I think I want to. I think I want to change with my relationship with money more, a little bit more.
Yeah, but do you see what I mean? Like, I understand how the two are related, but like, what your conflict. So you have two goals. One is to change careers, and one is to change your relationship with money, right?
Well, for like changing careers, it's like a secondary, or it's like, again, it's what I think I should do, because I mean, I feel like the
Yep.
reality is
Yeah.
that you have to earn money to survive in this world, unless you can like literally plant, like grow every single thing you eat, but like you still need to pay for electricity and stuff. So it's like, actually, like, to be quite honest, I don't want to work, and I know that's a common sentiment, but so I don't know, I feel like the career change is a little bit secondary,
Well,
but
but
my relationship with money is so strong that it feels like it may be the thing I want to change more, but it feels like it's going to be harder and longer to change that than to like, just get a job again and have some income.
yes. So let me ask you something. If you changed your relationship with money, what would happen to your job or job prospects or future?
Well, I would be more relaxed about it because I'm like, when I'm working, to be honest, I get money, and you would think that I would feel happy getting money, but I don't feel happy. And I also don't feel happy. I feel very anxious when I spend money as well. So I do think, yeah, that kind of needs to change.
Okay, I understand that. So why don't you tell us about your feelings about money? Can you articulate that a little bit?
It's very complicated because I think maybe it comes across this way, but like I keep talking about it, so obviously it's very like important in some way to me, or it's like weighing heavily on my mind. But actually, I think of it as like, how should I say, like I'm more towards the anti-work side of things. I don't really like capitalism. I prefer like socialism, or the ideals of like what
Sure.
communism could have been, or maybe the ideals of socialism. I'm very idealist, so I don't. It's kind of like very ego dystonic. My feeling about money.
Okay.
It's like I care so much about it, but
Damn,
I
someone's
hate
been
that
doing their
I
homework.
care about it. Pardon?
I said, damn, someone's been doing their homework.
Yeah.
Ego dystonic stages of change.
Yeah.
So tell me, how do you feel about money?
Conflicted.
So what's the conflict?
Like part of me cares a lot about it. The anxious part of me, I would say, the fear.
Can you tell us what the fear can you tell us about survival and money and the fear?
Yeah, it's like, I guess, especially now, because I've struggled with depression and anxiety and stuff. So it's like, I just lost my train of thought. Can you, sorry,
So
just
yeah,
repeat the
can you
question?
just tell me what you freak out about when it comes to money?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it's like I freak out about like going bankrupt and like being homeless and like dying in a painful way. Yeah.
Okay, good. I mean, not good, but thank you for explaining that, because that's what I'd assumed, but I think we just need to make sure. So now let me ask you a question. If you changed your attitudes about money and you are no longer worried about things, you've got savings saved up for a couple of years, you started chilling, right? You started to live this life where you're not working and like you don't have to figure it out right now because you're no longer paranoid about becoming bankrupt and homeless and dying a pauper. You with me so far?
Yeah.
How would you feel about yourself?
Yeah, I would feel, or I should say I do feel, because like I'm like going back and forth. I'm living back and forth like between these two states. So I feel better. I feel peaceful, but there is still that, I don't know, there's still that anxiety, like, and sometimes that's the thing. It's like, for me, it's like, I feel like I do acknowledge that I've made some progress, but my current situation is like, strange in that I feel so like today I'm actually in a very good mood or like pretty positive, like functioning normally, I would say. So I'm not in that depression where it's like, 6 months depression, like straight depression kind of thing. I'm like, it's strange because it's not even hypomania. I saw a psychiatrist and they said it doesn't qualify as hypomania, but it's like, I would say just a level under where it's like within a month, um, I I'm like feeling positive. Like right now, I'm doing things like going outside, like talking to my career counselor, trying to like have information interviews, like working on things. But then I think like just some small negative things build up over time. And I think I have a problem. I don't really know how to like release it properly or if I'm releasing it properly. But maybe
What's an example
I
of something that builds up?
like a very a small example, but recently happens. Like I just saw some spiders in my house and I was like, I wasn't that angry about it, but I was angry about it. And then it's like a couple of those small things where it's like, and I don't completely berate myself, but I feel a little bit bad at like, I don't know, I was just angry about it. So
Okay.
yeah, I don't know, but just those kinds of like small things, yeah.
So Snow, I'm gonna go out. Is it okay if I kind of go out on a limb and make a couple of assumptions and try to do something that
Yeah.
I don't do often, which is potentially give you advice?
Please, yeah.
So I'm noticing a lot of different things. The first is that it seems like the way that you process your emotions could be better, especially when it comes to the piling up of small things.
Yeah.
Okay. So if someone has difficulty processing small emotional insults, let's say, or attacks, what does that mean for their work situation? If I have difficulty processing the frustrations and challenges of work on a day-to-day basis, what's going to happen to me over time?
You'll burn out.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay? So once you burn out, then working is hard, right?
Yeah.
So this is where I'm going to say, like, I think it's going to be drastic for you to, I'm not saying it's not possible, but it sounds like you have a certain value for money and you have a certain idea of what you should be doing. What's your ethnicity, by the way, if you don't mind me asking? You don't have to answer if you don't feel comfortable with it, but I'm just curious.
I'm East Asian.
Okay. So so the reason I asked, I suspected that. And the reason that I asked is because oftentimes people from East Asian cultures will have a particular security oriented approach to money. Did you grow up in a household like that?
No, I don't. I think my grandparents, yes, but I didn't live with them that long. But maybe I absorbed it, like really absorbed it, and don't realize that. Yeah.
It's possible, right? So, like, this is where we have to be careful about ethnic, racial, and cultural influences on an individual mind. Because just because there have been studies done, for example, on Asian Americans and mental health, where we can do literal research and discover that there are particular patterns that are like common to Asian Americans in their mental health, which are separate from the average American. And also, just because there are cultural patterns does not mean that those patterns translate 100% to an individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the thing is, I don't know that you're ready to part with your security related to money. What do you think?
Yeah, I think because I do feel that is quite a big resistance.
Yep.
Like I know things logically, like it may be worth it, or it's probably worth it to like, pay for therapy sessions again, but like, and I've had I guess the problem is also I've had experiences, and all my therapy experiences so far have not really worked, like with the CBT ACT models, and even like myself, the things I try to learn on my own. I think honestly, like you're the most helpful so far, but I'm still stuck.
Yeah.
So that's yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that therapy has not been as helpful as it could have been. I'm happy to hear that you've been able to find some help somewhere. And also, I think that maybe the way we're thinking about this is a little bit different. So I'm seeing a couple of different problems. The first is that if you can't process, and can't is a strong word, but if you've made the observation, which I think is absolutely on the right path, that sometimes little emotional things pile up and you don't process them properly, that will absolutely lead to burnout in the workplace. Now, the interesting thing is that if you were to manage that and not feel burnt out in the workplace, the interesting thing about that is I think that could settle a lot of things for you. I'm not saying that you should continue to work for the rest of your life even, or that you should be a part of the capitalist system or whatever. All I'm saying is that there's only one dumpster fire we can deal with at a time. And right now, what I'm getting the sense of is that in your life, there's a confluence of problems that are all hitting you at the same time. So it's like now you're burnt out at work and you don't even want to work. So is now a good time? So like one solution to being burnt out from work is stopping to care about money. Does that make sense? Because if I stop caring about money, then I don't need to work and all the pressure's off and it's like, I'm fine. But that doesn't sound to me like, it sounds to me like mentally checking out a little bit. And I don't think that's actually like a healthy way to deal with burnout. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
At the same time, I do think that you've recognized that there are some attitudes towards money. So I'm guessing that because you have this survivalistic kind of bend towards money, when you want something and you can afford it, when you buy it, you still feel guilty and can't enjoy it entirely.
Yeah, like because I bought some books and stuff, and if I don't read it, I feel like I didn't use it. So it's like, and I can give up so easily, like I'm buying things because of that.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So independent of the burnout and work stuff, even if you're working hard, it sounds like you're not even able to enjoy the fruits of the capitalistic war machine.
Yeah.
Right? So like that's a separate issue which absolutely needs to be solved. You need to change your relationship with money, be a little bit more chill. I think part of the problem though is that these two things I think are absolutely connected, but I think they're artificially connected. Like the solution to burnout is not to stop caring about money. Does that make sense? Yeah. Even though they are connected and we can see how they're connected. So in my mind, I'm almost seeing two separate problems here, each of which needs to be solved. It's just an issue of which one you want to tackle first. And I wonder if part of the reason that it's hard for you to get out of the contemplative phase is actually because you've got two separate problems that you're linking together.
Yeah, like that makes sense. And I do agree, like, I guess I have a problem with priority as well. In terms of the two problems, like, is it what you were referring to before in terms of like basically the two paths I want to go on?
Sort of, right? Because what you're doing is I think both of these can be solved, but they can be solved independently. Whereas what you're doing is linking the two. And I think the problem is that when you link the two, there's like two sets of values that you both hold that conflict pretty hard with each other.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so I think actually what you can do is resolve both of those values. But the problem is that the way that you've set up the equation, it's like there's losses on both sides.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think, interestingly enough, sometimes that's normal for contemplative. Like if I want to give up alcohol, there are benefits to giving up alcohol and there are losses to giving up alcohol, right? That sort of makes sense. But in my mind, there's like two actually separate issues. Burnout and your relationship with money. I don't think the reason that you got burnt out was your relationship with money. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can agree with that.
So then the question becomes, if the reason you burnt out doesn't have to do with your relationship with money, why are you trying to solve that by changing your relationship with money?
I guess so. Like originally, I said that was the, or just to me, I felt like it's more important to change my relationship with money. But I don't know, like from what you're saying, or not even what you're saying, just like from what I feel now, like, and I think you mentioned, yeah, like maybe if I solve the burnout and like get back to work, but also kind of change my mindset in some ways, then it will set me up a little bit better to deal with the money
I think
issues.
I think so. So let me give you a couple of reasons for that. The first is like, I don't know how to say this, but if I have, let's say, a complicated relationship with romantic partners, some of that stuff I have to deal with on my own, but I can't fix that problem by giving up romantic relationships. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
Like if I decide, okay, like I've struggled in romantic relationships, so I'm going to be celibate. Being celibate may protect me from some of the stress of a relationship, but it doesn't solve the relationship issues.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to say this, but all of your fears of survival and the security that money brings, those are hard enough to tackle when you've got it. If you're
Like
not
on its
working
own?
for 2 years and your bank account is shrinking month to month to month, it's like an absolutely do or die situation. You're like throwing a Hail Mary. Because either you figure this out or you're completely wiped. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like I'm not
So
in as yeah.
So dealing with an insecurity ideally should not be done by putting yourself completely at the mercy of the insecurity. The way that you develop security is by actually being in a secure place and then tackling your insecurity. It's not like throwing yourself into the insecurity headlong. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So what that means in terms of money is that if you, let's say you decide not to work again and you just chill for a couple of years, you could do a lot of intense personal work and you could come out the other side a very transformed person. It's absolutely possible. I think it's going to be a bumpy road and you may not come out the other side in the way that you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So almost what I would say here is you start actually with little stuff like emotional processing on a day-to-day basis, and you really consider a career change. And then hopefully what you can find is some kind of work that you find fulfilling and does not burn you out. Now, if you need to take a break from work for 6 months or a year or whatever, like I'd say go for it. And the reason that you save, and this is where even the money part of you that's paranoid, we tell the money part of you, hey, the reason that we've scrimped and saved over 5 years is so that if we needed to take a break, we absolutely could. And in order for me to find a career that is fulfilling and for my long-term financial security, I needed to take a break for 6 months to a year. So you almost want to appease that part a little bit. What do you think about that?
So when I hear that, sorry. Part of me feels comforted, so that's kind of why I'm crying, but part of me, the anxiety part of me, like, still kind of gives back, like, throws back, I don't know, like, retorts, yeah.
Good. So you noticed that, right? So that's why I think it's going to be really hard for you to overcome that while the daily pressures of being unemployed are pounding on you.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you feel comforted because that's what we need to do, right? We need to not kick the part of you because the money part of you is actually looking out for you. It loves you. It cares about you.
Yeah.
And also we need to tell it that, hey, like sometimes Snow needs a break. We've worked really hard for 5 years doing something that we didn't really enjoy, where we were suffering a lot on a day-to-day basis, and we're kind of running on empty, and we need a break for a little while. I know you're afraid. I know that you're paranoid that we'll become lazy and it'll be a gap on our resume and all of these other scary thoughts that it tells you, right?
Yeah.
And then you can say like, yeah, but we need a little bit of space because the old way wasn't working. And we're going to come back. We're going to be recharged. We're going to really think about what kind of career that we have that is fulfilling for us and provides us with financial security. That's the end goal.
Yeah.
How does hearing that make you feel?
To be honest, like that is kind of where I was at, but I think what would help me in this situation, because like what's really helped so far is you actually telling me like that like dealing with the burnout is probably easier. Like first of all, should not be conflated entirely with money, and is probably easier than actually fixing my relationship with money. So but on that topic, like for the emotional processing, because honestly, I'm still very confused. I've watched a lot of videos and stuff, but like, could you give me some specific details about like what methods I should use? Or like, I don't know, I feel like I am using some methods, but it's not working as effectively for me. Yeah.
What methods are you using?
So, so I journal a lot. 'Cause like I guess my question here is like, is talking more effective, like actually verbalizing, versus even whispering or like journaling or like typing?
What do
Is
you
it?
think, Snow?
I feel like it's a personal thing, but for me, I think like talking, maybe I have to do some more introspection, or like analysis, but I feel like talking helps me more, but it's actually like so hard for me sometimes, especially when I'm depressed. Like I just don't want to talk at all sometimes.
Okay. Has this been helpful today?
It has been helpful.
But
I'm aware, or like I remember when like I felt like this with some therapy sessions before, and like I kind of just fall into the same pit again. So that's why I'm trying to ask for like specific steps for emotional processing. I don't know, because I honestly feel like I don't understand if there is a best way, or like, yeah, I should figure out myself, or like,
do
yeah.
you think we processed some emotions today?
I feel like I feel like the answer should be yes, but I also might be alexithymic or like just partially, and it's hard for me to like I don't know what it feels like to process your emotions.
Yeah. So let's understand what happened today, okay? So I'm also getting maybe a little bit of an insight into why therapy has quote unquote not been very effective for you. So I said a couple things and then you broke down crying, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened? What did you do immediately after that?
I apologized.
I don't remember that, but maybe you did.
Oh,
I don't think you did anything wrong. So then like we were talking about all this kind of stuff, and then like you sort of did a 180 on me, and you were like, do you have any concrete skills for emotional processing? And actually what was helpful was when you told me to do A, B, C, D. Like when you told me like, okay, I need to work on emotional processing and burnout first. So I think what's going on is that sometimes when you get close to emotionally processing, you actually look for some kind of regimen or solution to do it instead of actually doing the work. Does that make sense? So like right on the cusp of emotional processing, your logical mind actually takes over. So you step away from your emotional mind and you're like, okay, give me a logical plan to emotionally process. And the moment that actually happens, you move away from emotional processing.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that sinking in or no?
No, I understand what you're saying because I definitely like the word that comes to mind is optimization.
Yes. You can't. Good. To keep going.
But then the problem is like, have I don't know, because my question is then like, I don't, again, it's like, I don't know what I should be feeling if I've totally like followed it through, completely emotionally processed. Like, is it the cathartic feeling after crying? Is that like 100% or?
Yeah. So I think if you get the opportunity to work with a therapist, I think you should. And I think what you should do with that therapist, so this is tricky, but sometimes I've had patients like this. Some patients need to be given solutions on the surface and then need the emotional processing to happen without them realizing it. So this is the kind of thing where I think the more you get closer to emotionally processing, the more your mind is going to be like actually feels uncomfortable. And then what happens when we feel uncomfortable with emotions is our logical mind is like, let's optimize, because optimizing is safe territory for you, right? You know how to
Yeah.
optimize, Snow. You made a PowerPoint about
No, I
contempling.
didn't make it. I found it online.
Whatever, right? So you had this PowerPoint ready. You did your homework. So like optimization, being a good person in terms of doing your work, and like if I give you an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I say, Snow, do these things, you will do it until you are burnt out and you can't do it anymore. Right? But what you want is like pushed all the way to the back.
Yeah.
And then you end up burning yourself out because you're so good at pushing yourself what you want to the back. Oh, I want this. I want this particular shirt, let's say, or I want this bicycle. And then what you want, in comes your money complex, and your money complex is like, no, Snow, we can't afford that. We need this money for a rainy day. So no bike for Snow. And then here comes a rainy day where we're burnt out and we can't work. Look, we saved all this money for a rainy day. And your money complex is like, no, we can't actually spend the money for a rainy day on a rainy day. We have to keep that in case there's a rainy day. Right?
No, it's like, maybe I was saving it for a rainy day, but I don't even want to spend it
Yeah.
on the rainy day.
Right, exactly, right? So it's like, it's weird because you've saved it specifically for this purpose. Now, in terms of like what to do for you, I do think that this is where there's like some concrete stuff about processing emotions. So like journaling at the end of the day, I think is useful. There's a particular meditation exercise that we sometimes teach people, which I can share with you today, which is before you go to bed. It's kind of, I guess, is our meditation for the day. But basically go back. So when we start our day, usually we feel pretty fresh. And then as the day goes on, there are all kinds of emotions that come up that aren't like worked through properly. And so we get scared from the spiders and we have all these thoughts, and then we get distracted, right? Before we resolve the problem of the spiders, we get pulled into something else. So that leftover emotion gets kind of like banked. At the end of the day, we've wound ourselves up. And sometimes people have difficulty falling asleep because they're worrying about all this different stuff. That's all banked up emotion that's been waiting to get out. So there's a simple practice that you can do, which is what I call the meditative rewind practice. I think it's in Dr. K's guide if you've had access to that, but I can teach it to you now. And it's basically you go back, you start at the end of your day. So if you're laying in bed and you go backwards in time and go through basically each event of the day. And as you go through each event of the day, you acknowledge especially the emotional impact of that. So, for example, I was brushing my teeth, but my partner didn't put the cap on the toothbrush. So the first amount of, on the toothpaste. So the first amount of toothpaste that came out was all crusty and like dried out, and I couldn't even brush my teeth with it. And it was really annoying because they do that all the time. Oh my God. And wow, I really got frustrated with them. Sort of acknowledge the emotion and then kind of go to the previous thing. So before that, I had to do the laundry. Before that, I had a great piece of cake for dessert, and that was really enjoyable before that. And you basically want to go through all of your day and just acknowledge the emotions that you felt until you end up with waking up. Sometimes the practice takes 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. For some people, it can take even a little bit longer. And that can be sort of like, it sort of starts you off with, okay, the day started, I was pretty fresh. And now I've like worked through, like acknowledge for yourself that you've worked through a lot of what's happened today. And now it's time to go to bed.
So yeah, I want to say I have heard of this before. I did watch it on the guide. But when you say acknowledge, like, do you mean kind of like what you just did, saying it in my mind, and like in a calm manner, but not getting hooked by the feelings?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So you'll feel some of the feelings come up, right? And you want to just notice, wow, that really upset me.
Okay.
And it was just incredibly frustrating. But then, very good question. So then you don't want to get caught up in it. So remember, the purpose of the meditative rewind practice is to be like somewhat sequential. So then, like, if, for example, with the toothpaste example, if I'm not careful, then what my mind will do is be like, I can't believe, like, I've told them so many times and they never listen, and they do this and they do this, and last time during my birthday they forgot this, and then your mind is off all kinds of places, and then it just ramps itself up.
Yeah.
So you don't want to like engage too much, but you want to kind of acknowledge, okay, wow, like how did I really feel in that moment?
Okay, so actually like labeling it. And...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So some of the stuff may go back to EQ, emotional quotient. And one of the key skills of emotional quotient is being able to identify your internal emotional state. Mm-hmm. So that's a very concrete kind of thing that you can do. It's a good meditation practice. Okay.
Okay.
The other thing to just think a little bit about is, if you want to take a break for a little while, negotiate with the money complex and see what amount of time it can actually give you off. If it's 3 months, 6 months, whatever, maybe it's still 2023. Mm-hmm. And then give yourself that time. And then what I would really start doing is thinking about, what kind of work would you find more fulfilling? And then hopefully also, it's not just the work, because I think this is what a lot of the anti-work people kind of miss, is that there are absolutely crappy jobs out there, but you have an influence in terms of how happy you are at a job. Right? This is where the biggest problem with the anti-work movement is that they assume that jobs are completely static. And part of the reason for that, I don't really blame them for that, because what happens is because of the nature of social media and stuff like that, the most extreme scenarios rise to the surface. So what everyone is reading about are the places that are terrible to work. There's some places that are terrible to work, some places that are amazing to work. And the truth is, most places are kind of in the middle, where like most bosses actually want their employees to be like happy. Like most bosses are not, capitalistic overlords. This has been my experience. Maybe I've been lucky. But, they want the job done, but it's like a lot of bosses, like I've had multiple bosses, many of them care about me as people, as a person. I'll still reach out to them. I have good relationships with them. Like those kinds of bosses exist. So to think a little bit about, okay, what kind of career do you want to be in? What sort of work do you find like engaging? And then also, whenever you do decide to go back to work, or when you try to look for jobs or whatever, then start to really consider, don't put up with crap just because your money complex tells you we need this job in order to survive, right? That's where you've got to start changing the way that you behave at work. And that's where, so for example, one of the things we found in career coaching is that what a lot of people benefit from is working out with a coach, first of all, what they feel at work that they're unhappy with, and then practicing how to talk to people about it. So that when you go and talk to your boss, you don't come across as a whiny, entitled employee. You don't lead with your emotions, right? You're not like, there's an eruption of frustration. What it is like going to your boss and like sort of having a nice like pre-prepared thing that's like, hey, this is something I found really frustrating at work. This person in particular seems to like purposely, I know it sounds kind of paranoid, seems to be purposely like trying to make my life difficult. And at first I thought, am I just being paranoid? But I've actually talked to these 3 coworkers who say that this person does the same thing to them.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm just trying to do my job. I want to do a good job, and these other 3 people are too. But as long as this person is like sabotaging us, not only does it make it frustrating, I spend basically 60 to 90 minutes like trying to fix this person's problems. And when you frame things to a boss like that, oftentimes the boss will like be on your side. It's just about communicating things in a good way. So I think there's a lot about work that you can handle yourself. And what we also know about research from burnout is that burnout is a combination of individual things plus work things. It's not created entirely by work, and it's not created entirely by an individual. So the problem is that employers think that burnout is an employee problem. Employees think that burnout is an employer problem. Y'all should fix this because I'm burning out. Or mental health is your responsibility as an employee. So here's a subscription to a meditation app and hands off. We're not going to change anything about the way that we work. So the problem is that both sides are trying to punt burnout to the other one. Whereas in all of the interventions that I've done on burnout that have been successful, it involves a shared responsibility. Just to give you one quick example of that. So one place called me in to teach meditation. And I was like, cool, I'm happy to teach meditation. When are we going to do it? And they're like, okay, well, their shift ends at 6 p.m., so you can teach meditation from 6 to 6:30. And then I said, If you want me to teach meditation, it has to be a part of their workday, and they need to be excused of 30 minutes of work in order to learn meditation. You can't make wellness an additional burden on your employees. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, okay, fine. And it worked out great. Surprisingly, teaching 30 minutes of meditation did not impact productivity negatively at all. People just got their work done in the same amount of time. They just spent less time on like browsing on Reddit, sitting on the toilet, not working. Right? Anyway, this is kind of a tangent, but this just goes back to this idea that burnout, I think, is going to be somewhat individually influenced. And if you can manage your emotions at work and be super careful about suppressing what you dislike at work because money and security.
Okay, so I think I feel like I still don't understand the suppression or emotional processing part, but if I can try to summarize and you can say if it's correct or not, then it's
Sure.
I don't know, are you laughing because I'm trying to rationalize this again, or
No, I'm laughing.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That was sometimes I
No, smiling,
wear
sorry.
my expressions on my face. I was actually appreciating how conscientious you are about learning. And I'm glad that you asked if it made you a little uncomfortable, because I think it's awesome. You're a fantastic student.
oh god, I think I lost my train of thought, but it was something about rationalizing.
You were going to try to summarize emotional processing and suppressing emotions.
Okay, let me think. Sorry. So I guess my takeaway is that I may have thought I was emotionally processing when, like I was kind of either living the emotion, or even I may have been able to notice it, which sounds like that's the right path. Suppressing it may have come in when I started to rationalize too early. So I guess like it's just like I understand the stuff about doing it at the end of the day, especially if I haven't had time throughout the day. But it's like if I had time in the day, like, so I let myself be angry about the spiders like fully first, because I don't want to get too angry Like if I don't let myself get too angry, is that suppressing it?
So, uh, okay. So, letting yourself, I don't know what you mean by too angry, because that implies, it sounds like that's suppressing. So, because you're using the word too, which is the point is there's not like an appropriate amount of emotion, right? There's just, you feel what you feel. It's just, what do you do with what you feel? So do you let it control your behaviors? Do you let it control your thoughts? Or do you acknowledge it, kind of notice it? And then like the interesting thing about emotion that is acknowledged and noticed is that it tends to take control of you less. The problem is that when we suppress emotion, it actually takes control of us more, because when we suppress it, we lose awareness of it. And that's how you get people who are like, think they're super logical, but are actually like behaving quite emotionally. Does that make sense?
I just have one question. Is that so in the past, I have tried to notice my emotions, and I guess the thing is because it didn't, like, in the way it worked, because yes, like if I feel myself getting angry and I notice that, it does calm it down, because otherwise I'm feeding into it by like, by my thoughts. But in some ways, it felt like when I noticed it, when it calmed down, it felt like that was suppressing it because it was going down. I think that's wrong, right?
Well, so, I mean, so that's where I think you should figure it out. But so maybe the reason it felt like it was suppressing it is because you are probably pretty good at suppressing your emotions. And so your primary coping mechanism for negative emotion is suppression. And so the end result is the same. The emotion goes down. The question is it coming back later? In the case of suppression, it's going to come back. In the case of processing, it shouldn't, or it'll come back weaker.
It's so hard. I guess it's really hard to tell though, because it's hard for me to tell.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll have some kind of, we may do a stream or something soon. I've been writing up a curriculum on emotional processing. And originally this was slated to be for group coaching, but we may stream a portion of it or something. I don't know exactly what I'm doing with it. But I've noticed that there's actually a need in the community that no one ever teaches us how to process emotions.
Yeah, that would be super helpful to get information on.
Yeah, so I just have to figure out how to break it down into steps. But I think for you, Snow, a couple of like key things to remember is, first of all, I'd start with just being a little bit careful about trying to solve burnout by adjusting your relationship with money. I think these are both issues that you're probably going to have to deal with in terms of figuring out how to work in a healthy, fulfilling way. I mean, you don't necessarily have to. If you really decide that's not for you, that's totally fine. But I don't think that burning out after 4 or 5 years of working is a good reason to leave the workforce. I mean, I think it's a good reason to leave the workforce then. But I would not go completely off of working, because I think that there's a lot of value to doing stuff that you find enriches the world. And that's where I do believe that a lot of jobs out there like do create value for people. And it's about sort of figuring out how you manage emotions to prevent your burnout. And then hopefully once that sort of gets sorted out, then over time, once you've got, once you're not dipping into your savings, then you can start to develop a really healthy relationship with money.
I don't know. I'm not asking for like a full thing, but like, do you just have any like quick, or is it possible to have any quick tips on developing good relationship with money? Like just a direction?
I think a lot of it is, is somewhat similar to stuff that we've covered before, in the sense that I think, first of all, acknowledging that that part of your mind is looking out for you. It's not a bad
Yeah.
guy that needs to be conquered. So
Yeah.
it's almost like trying to reassure it without giving into it. That's really the goal, right? Is to notice that, okay, like you really are looking out for me, but we have 4 years of savings or 2 years of savings. I can actually afford a bicycle. Right? Like if I go from 2 years to 1.98 years of savings,
Yeah.
that's okay. And like I deserve to be a little bit happy. And one of the things that money is absolutely there for security,
Yeah.
and money is also there to like help people feel happy. And that's where I would even think a little bit about being like concrete with it. So like how much money would I have to save in order to feel secure? And sort of just really
Yeah.
thinking through things like that.
Okay, yeah, because I've thought about those things before. Like, it's so hard. Like, I cannot put a number to it, or it will be a really
Yep.
like a high number. But maybe it sounds like I'm doing the right thing in terms of like acknowledging that, like, I do recognize that it's actually trying to protect me. So it sounds like I should keep doing that. It sounds like that is the right thing to do.
Yeah. So I also get the sense that, you know, you've come a long way from, it sounds like, where you were, because even today you're sort of, I think, like you mentioned, you're contemplative, right? So you've moved out of pre-contemplative into contemplative. So you acknowledge the advantages and the disadvantages of your relationship with money. And that's actually huge. So I think if you just kind of keep at it for a while, and also like some of that work is easier to do, you know, it's easier to learn detachment from food when your stomach is full. It's harder to learn it when your stomach is empty.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. So it sounds like that's, yeah. So good luck to you, Snow. Any last questions before we wrap up for the day?
No, I guess there was that meditation. I was just curious about like mantras. Like, would you recommend any for me, or just go with like the Om chanting?
Let me think about that for a second. Are you, do you participate in any kind of religious tradition, Snow?
Not actively, but I identify with Buddhism.
Okay. So I think I do have a general recommendation. It's just not something that I can teach you. So I feel like if you can get access to someone who can teach you a Lakshmi-oriented mantra, I do think that would help you.
Could you spell that out for me?
Yeah, Lakshmi.
Lakh.
Shmi.
Okay.
So if you're in the Buddhist tradition, a lot of the traditionally Hindu gods will have Buddhist counterparts or versions. So there may be some kind of bodhisattva that is in the same direction as Lakshmi. The problem is that most of my spiritual training is not from that tradition. So I can't teach that to you. But I feel like that's probably what you need.
Well, would it be harmful if I did it? Or I understand that you can't teach it to me, but like, if I found, like, I'm trying to say, would it be harmful if I did that specific one and not like a Buddhist counterpart?
No, it wouldn't be harmful. It's just if you're leaning towards so for example, like if you go to a Buddhist temple and there's a Buddhist monk there, you can go and ask that Buddhist monk, do you know a Lakshmi mantra or know anything that's similar to a Lakshmi mantra?
Okay.
Does that,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. It wouldn't be harmful, but I would definitely recommend learning from an actual person who understands this stuff if you can. Like, you can Google a Lakshmi mantra, but
Yeah.
I've noticed a difference between people who Google mantras and chant them and people who are taught mantras by a specific person.
Got it. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. Take care, Snow. Good luck.
Bye.
All right. So, a lot of stuff to cover there. I think it's I think Snow was a great example of how a lot of stuff that's happening in the world right now can intersect. Right? So if I want to develop a healthy relationship with money, that's sort of like a personal quest in here. But then that can, developing a healthy relationship with money can really intersect with work-related burnout and sort of like capitalistic, socialistic, whatever, like work environment kind of stuff. And the interesting thing is that, as we go through personal conflicts and we have personal challenges at work, sometimes what happens is we externalize those to broad scale things. And I think it can be healthy up to a point. Like, it's important to understand trends that are going on in the world. At the same time, we've got to be a little bit careful, because when you sort of say, I am unhappy with my job, and the reason that I am unhappy with my job is a capitalistic society, that may be true, but it leaves you with very little actionable stuff. So in medicine, we've got this really interesting principle, which oftentimes patients don't understand, which is don't order a test unless it's going to alter your management. So we never order tests or imaging or anything like that just to know. We only order stuff if it's actually going to change what we do. So if I have a 90-year-old woman who may have uterine cancer, but they're not going to be on chemotherapy and they're not going to go to surgery, there's actually no point in ordering the test because it's not going to change what we do, right? So that's common thinking. Obviously, if the patient really wants the test and wants to know for other reasons, then that's a different story. But generally speaking, we want to focus on things that are alterable. The tricky thing with a lot of this like anti-work sentiment is that there may be alterations, like maybe you need to change who you vote for and go vote and stuff like that. That I think is all fantastic. But we also have to be careful, because sometimes there are things that you can do to affect how burnt out you are at work. And we're not suggesting that, and this is where the employers get tricky, because what they'll say is that 100% of the burden is on you. If you're burnt out, it's your fault. In my experience, and actually the literature supports this, if you look at Maslach's original research on burnout, it's sort of an intersectional problem. Right? So it's the connection between a person and a work environment that creates burnout. So that's where there's some stuff that you can alter and some stuff that you can't. And that's where like you fix what you can. And if you're still unhappy there and your workplace can't accommodate the rest or aren't willing to accommodate the rest or whatever, then you should consider finding a different job or whatever. But I think what we've really discovered is that there's a lot that you can do in terms of how you communicate to your boss, altering your schedule, changing, setting healthy boundaries. Like if your boss texts you at 10 p.m., don't answer. And they're like, hey, I texted you at 10 p.m., you didn't answer on Monday morning. You say, yeah, I'm sorry, I was confused. Am I supposed to be working at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night? You can ask them, is that an expectation? And that's where, like if they say, yeah, like obviously, like you need to be available on your phone 24/7. You can say, okay, I understand that. So currently my contract has this amount of work over this period of time listed. So availability 24/7, how does that affect like compensation? Just ask, right? They're like, oh, like it doesn't. If you don't like it, you can leave. And if your boss responds to you in a way like that, you could say, okay, thanks for clarifying. I appreciate it. And then you could start applying for other jobs. And then, you'll a week later, you're like, by the way, I'm leaving. When are you leaving? I'm leaving tomorrow. How can you do that to me? Surprised Pikachu face. Oh, well, you said if it didn't work for me, I should leave. So it's not working for me, so I'm going to go. Surprised Pikachu face. Right? And then they're like, no, but like, And that's where you could say, look, I'm confused. You're not going to be angry. So you're just like, I'm confused. We talked about I was hired to do one job. You asked me to do something else. I asked about compensation. You said it wasn't available. And you said that if I didn't like it, I should leave. So I'm leaving. and that's, it's not, people are being passive. It's not passive aggressive. It's just setting a limit and sticking to it. You're not punishing them. It's just, okay, these are the terms of work and that doesn't work for me. So that happens sometimes. Anyway, we're getting off track. But the key thing here is that sometimes, personal stuff like my relationship with money can kind of connect with work-related stuff. And that's where I do think that Snow was a really good example of demonstrating how if you do a lot of emotional suppression, it's going to lead to burnout. And that's where sometimes if I feel a certain way, it's not necessarily that the job needs to change it, right? Some of that is just emotions that I need to process. That it's a frustrating job. Like even if you work in medicine, which is a sort of a good place to work generally. It's bad in some ways, but good in other ways. There's still just a lot about the job that can be incredibly frustrating. And that's what happens with jobs is like no job is perfect. And so managing that kind of stuff and like even communicating to your boss like in a healthy and productive way about what your needs are, what your limits are, what you're trying to understand the rules of the game. And stuff like that, that's all stuff that's really, really important to do. So I think sometimes when we really look at career-oriented stuff, we don't realize that there's like a personal component to it. And that's actually why we developed the career coaching program. But, is because we sort of realized, okay, like, wait a minute, this isn't just about negotiation tactics. Because everyone's like, okay, here's a book about negotiating, where it's like, hold on, you need to understand how you feel a little bit first. Because a lot of times what gets people into trouble is like, untempered feelings at work, right? Anyway, so we covered meditation. So if y'all are interested in emotional processing, I think the Meditative Rewind is a really good one. Last thing that we have to figure out is who we're going to raid for today. Thoughts? I feel like a lot of these are debates, dude. This is the problem, is that if you're a streamer and your name can end in something called Raid Gorp. Okay, we can Raid Gorp. Trihex or Gorp? Dad feels one? What is Dad feels one? Okay, Trihex. Okay. Well, Trihex has slightly fewer people, so we'll raid Trihex. All right, y'all. Take care. Send Trihex some love. We'll see y'all on Wednesday, okay?